Marshall Peak, Chapter 59-28, The Mysterious Unknown Land. Marshall Peak, Zhao Yibai was frozen stiff in a corner of the suppressing black ink fortress, his sweat-drenched clothes clinging to his skin. For a brief moment, he felt the aura of death deep within his bones, and thought he had already tread upon the gates of hell. He was even more horrified by the fact that he could not move. He could not do anything to stop or block his honored master's sudden attack. In other words, if his honored master wanted to kill him, a single attack from his spear would suffice. It was an awe-inspiring strength. Zhao Yibai was at the peak of the 8th Order, and once Yang Shui became a 9th Order master, Zhao Yibai sought her out for a friendly exchange. Even though neither one of them used their full strength in the battle, and Zhao Yibai had not been Yang Shui's equal by any means, he had still been able to put up a fight for a few dozen blows. He was also proficient in the Tao of Space, so if he wanted to escape, Yang Shui would not be able to stop him. Out of all the current 8th Order masters, he was one of the strongest. Even so, his strength seemed inconsequential when he was up against his honored master. At the last moment, someone blocked the spear from striking Zhao Yibai. Zhao Yi stood in front of Zhao Yibai with her spear held horizontally in front of her to block the Azure Dragon spear. The heaven-destroying, earth-shattering dominance disappeared once the spears made contact. Zhao Yi was still in the throes of lingering fear and shock, though she felt a little dazed as well. She did not know how she managed to unleash such formidable strength to protect her eldest senior brother from her honored master's attack. The black ink strength surrounding Yang Kai vanished as he returned to normal. He eyed Zhao Yi, who looked terrified, and asked, "Do you understand now?" Zhao Yi pursed her lips and hoarsely replied, "Disciple understands." Yang Kai nodded. Out of his 3 disciples, Zhao Yibai's aptitude was the poorest, while Zhao Yi's was the highest. In fact, her aptitude was stronger than anyone else Yang Kai had ever met. Throughout the last few millennia, there were many fine young talents from the Star Boundary, Void World, and Myriad Monsters world. Many were able to ascend directly to 7th Order, but when it came to their natural aptitude for cultivating, no one surpassed Zhao Yi. She had strong comprehension, and though she had taken a few wrong turns in her cultivation of the Spear Tao, Yang Kai was certain this experience would be enough for her to have a decisive breakthrough in her mastery of this grand Tao. As Yang Kai withdrew the Azure Dragon Spear, Zhao Yi felt as if she had used up every bit of strength she had in her and crumpled weakly into Zhao Yibai's arms. Yang Kai turned to Su Yi. Su Yi gulped and stepped forward. "Please teach me, honored master." After seeing what his second senior sister went through, he did not know what kind of guidance he would be receiving from his honored master. Thankfully, Yang Kai simply raised his hand and condensed time principles above it. The time principles solidified as Yang Kai demonstrated the mysteries of the Tao of time the same way he did when he taught Zhao Yibai earlier. Su Yi was fully attentive and was able to learn a lot. A half cup of tea's time later, Su Yi respectfully bowed and said, "Honored master, this disciple has been enlightened." Yang Kai nodded. He looked at his 3 disciples, and a thought occurred to him. "I once comprehended a divine ability that requires a combination of both the Tao of Space and the Tao of Time to work, and it is incredibly strong. Yibai, Su Yi, when you're free, you can try to comprehend it as well. Perhaps you will gain something from it." Yang Kai lifted his hand once more. As space principles burst forth, a great sun rose, and the full moon hung in the air. The sun and moon shone together. He then made another flick with his hand, and time principles began flowing. The 2 principles swirled and combined. Mysterious changes began occurring as the 2 vastly different principles intertwined, causing the sun and moon to begin spinning about, forming a kind of spiral that severely warped both space and time. Zhao Yibai and Su Yi were engrossed in what they saw. This is the sun and moon divine wheel. If you wish to produce it, You two will need to join forces and work together to have even a shred of possibility of creating this effect. The Sun and Moon Divine Seal was the enhanced version of this divine ability, but Zhao Yibai and Su Yi could not produce it at their current strength. In fact, Yang Kai was not even certain whether they could produce the Sun and Moon Divine Wheel. Yang Kai was proficient in both Grand Daos, so it was easy enough for him to wield this divine ability. He did not know whether it was possible to achieve it if two masters were to work together instead. Nevertheless, there was no harm in trying. If Zhao Yibai and Su Yi were able to produce the Sun and Moon Divine Wheel together, they would have an additional trump card whenever they joined forces. After all, they were stuck in this place and could not cultivate or work towards their breakthroughs, so it was better for them to spend their time cultivating their Grand Daos. At least they could still make some progress. Zhao Yibai and Su Yi both nodded. "We have taken your teachings to heart, honored master. We won't let you down. And I still have other matters to attend to," Yang Kai declared. "Once the human race army arrives, Wu Kuang will find the chance to send all of you out of here." As he spoke, his divine sense flashed. Fu Guang appeared the next moment. "I must go, Senior, so I'll leave the suppressing black ink army in your care. You're heading over there." Evidently, Fu Guang had picked up on something, and Yang Kai nodded. "It could be an opportunity for us. Either way, I must take a look and see for myself." Fu Guang was concerned. "You have to be careful. I'm not sure what the exact situation is like, but Wu Kuang told me some things, and I know it's probably not safe there. Don't bite off more than you can chew and have the situation end up backfiring on you instead." "I'll play it by ear and act accordingly," Yang Kai assured. He then turned towards the void and called out, "Let's start, Wu Kuang." "Are you sure you want to go there?" Wu Kuang asked to confirm. "At a time like this, I can't back away. I can take you there, but I don't have the power to do anything more. You'll have to rely on yourself." "Of course." "Good." Although Wu Kuang knew that Yang Kai had already made up his mind, he still felt the need to check once more. Alas, it was as Yang Kai said, they could not back down now. A cloud of fog began enveloping Yang Kai's figure. It was Wu Kuang who was harnessing the power of the Grand Restriction. All at once, Yang Kai felt the suppressing black ink fortress swiftly moving away from him. The earlier scene of Wu Kuang transporting him around repeated itself as he weaved through the sea of black ink strength and headed towards a mysterious unknown land. Wu Kuang told Yang Kai a few things about the unknown land, but he did not give many details as it was hard for him to unearth the mysteries of that place too. As it was if it had not been for the sudden explosion of black ink strength a few years ago, Wu Kuang would not have known that such an unusual place existed inside the primordial heavens source Grand Restriction. It was a hidden hand that Mu left behind millennia ago during the humans' first crusade. They suffered a devastating defeat, and the crusade force endured catastrophic losses. Mo acted out, and Song was unable to stop it. When it looked as if the Grand Restriction was about to break open, and Mo was about to escape, Mu's silhouette appeared out of the blue. She used some strange method to make Mo fall into a deep slumber and saved the primordial heavens source Grand Restriction, which had been on the verge of collapse. In doing so, she saved the human race army from the danger of being wiped out, and the humans were able to spend thousands of years building themselves back up. Everyone thought that Mu's hidden hand had been completely used up. Even Song thought so as well before he died, which was why he did not hesitate to sacrifice himself and integrate with the Grand Restriction to strengthen it. Before Song passed on, he told Yang Kai about Shi and had him look for Shi's reincarnation to let the latter stand guard over the primordial heavens source Grand Restriction. That led to Yang Kai bringing Wu Kuang over to this place. Although he was not the same as Shi himself, he could still wield some of the strength of the primordial heavens source Grand Restriction. Sure enough, Wu Kuang had done a pretty good job over the past few thousand years. However, it now seemed that during the late ancient era, Mu had left another hidden hand behind. Forcing Mo into a deep sleep was not the end of it. There was more, which was hidden inside that unknown land. Wu Kuang could not figure out what it was precisely, but he had a vague feeling that a crucial piece to the puzzle was hidden there. He thought about getting Fu Guang to make the trip, but the suppressing Black Ink army was deep within enemy territory, and Fu Guang could not leave them. Thankfully, Yang Kai came along, and he was undoubtedly the best candidate to make this exploration. When Wu Kuang filled Yang Kai in on the information regarding the primordial heavens source grand restriction, they both knew that this trip had to be made. No matter what Mu's hidden hand was, someone needed to investigate. Otherwise, once Mo truly woke up, the human race's present heritage would not be enough to defeat it, and the entire human race would be exterminated. Yang Kai kept traversing through the sea of Black Ink strength. He had the protection of the primordial heavens source grand restrictions power. Thus, masters from the Black Ink clan scattered along the way could not detect him. Nearly there, at some point, Wu Kuang's voice rang out in Yang Kai's ear. Yang Kai tensed up in alertness at once. Soon, he felt his body hitting an invisible layer and sticking to it. It happened too quickly, so Yang Kai felt sore all over. Wu Kuang, what's going on? Yang Kai took a step back and asked. Wu Kuang innocently replied, I don't know. It seems to be preventing all living beings from entering. How am I supposed to go in then? Yang Kai frowned. Hang on. Let me take a look. While waiting, Yang Kai stretched his hand out and touched the barrier that was holding him back. It felt like a seal or restriction of some sort, but not quite either. Yang Kai got a very strange feeling from it. He was about to take a closer look when he felt his palm warming up slightly. A strange kind of energy seemed to come off that invisible layer and washed over him. Following that, Yang Kai's palm went through the barrier. Yang Kai was shocked and puzzled. He took a step forward and half his body went through. Huh? How did you do that? Wu Kuang exclaimed. Some sort of power seemed to check my identity before allowing me to enter. Yang Kai explained as he recalled what he experienced earlier. It checked your identity. Wu Kuang repeated thoughtfully. It's probably Mu's doing. This place is hidden inside the Grand Restriction, so she must have guarded it against the Black Ink clan and made sure that only humans can enter. Though they had no way of ascertaining whether this was indeed the case, it was the only plausible explanation they could think of right now. I'm going in, Yang Kai announced. Take this. As Wu Kuang's voice rang out, an object suddenly appeared in Yang Kai's hand, but before he could see what it was, he fell into the unknown land. All at once, Yang Kai froze in place. He saw a great river cutting through the void, with neither its beginning nor end in sight. The great river was longer and deeper than fathomable, and waves full of Tao strengths which kept ebbing and flowing. However, the auras of the time Tao strength and space Tao strength were the strongest. A space-time river. Marshall Peak. Marshall Peak, Chapter 59-29. Mu's space-time river. Marshall Peak, a space-time river, was hidden deep inside that mysterious unknown land within the primordial heaven source grand restriction. Yang Kai could not believe his eyes and was on the verge of thinking he was hallucinating. However, after studying it carefully, he concluded it was indeed a space-time river. Amid his shock, a question popped into his mind. Whose space-time river is this? In a flash, he got his answer. Since this place is part of the hidden hand Mu left behind, the space-time river has to be hers. Was Mu able to create a space-time river too? Does that mean she mastered the use of all 10,000 grand Daos? Judging by the size of this space-time river, Mu's mastery of the 10,000 grand Daos far exceeded his own. After a brief moment of shock, Yang Kai's heart filled with awe. Mu was indeed the strongest out of the 10 martial ancestors. Yang Kai did not think much of it when he saw the respect Song and Wu Kuang had for Mu, but after witnessing this space-time river, he finally realized just how incredible she was. Initially, he thought that his space-time river was the only one of its kind, but now he knew that he was not the first in history to achieve this feat soon. Yang Kai grew puzzled again, though. He was able to form his space-time river from 10,000 Tao strengths because he had been inspired by the infinite river inside the universe furnace. If Mu did likewise, did it mean she had once entered the universe furnace and saw the infinite river as well? Either way, Yang Kai felt a kind of joy at knowing that he walked the same path a martial ancestor once had, despite being separated by millions of years. Ever since Yang Kai heard about the mysteries of the creation realm from Tsang, he had been pondering about it. There were 9 orders to the open heaven realm, but even if one became a 9th order master, what were they to do next? Mo came into existence alongside the universe, so it was powerful beyond imagination. Being a 9th order master was not enough to kill Mo and remove its threat for good. To do that, one had to break past the 9th order open heaven realm. But how? How was one supposed to break through the 9th order open heaven realm? No one could provide any insight into this task. It could be said that the humans were reaching the end of the martial Tao which the martial ancestors had left for them. If they wanted to go even further, they had to clear the obstacles themselves to carve a new path starting from the end of what their ancestors had paved before them. Yang Kai did not have any ideas on how to do that until he created his space-time river inside the universe furnace. He had a vague feeling that the mysterious river created from 10,000 Tao strengths was the key to the way forward. However, there was no other human he could discuss this with right now. The discovery of another space-time river inside this mysterious unknown land changed everything. This was the space-time river that Mu left behind. She was the strongest of the martial ancestors, and despite having died millions of years ago, the mere hidden hand she left behind was able to make Mo fall into a deep slumber. Her presence thus lingered on in this manner. When she lived, Mu would have been trying to discover the mysteries of the realm above, the 9th order open heaven realm. If Yang Kai was only 10% certain that the space-time river was the key to breaking past the 9th order open heaven realm, then he was about 30% certain now he had inadvertently trod down the same path Mu had. That being said, before arriving at his intended destination, Yang Kai did not know whether this path would take him to an even higher pinnacle of martial Tao, or turn out to be a dead end instead. Many thoughts raced through Yang Kai's mind, but he soon had his attention focused as he sensed that this space-time river differed from his not just in size, but in other ways too. Strange images flickered each time the waves crashed. The images flew by at rapid speeds in such a bizarre fashion that even Yang Kai had a hard time picking them out. He was about to use his divine sense to take a closer look when a huge wave burst out of the space-time river and came crashing down on him. Yang Kai's instinctive reaction was to back off, but a thought suddenly occurred to him, and he stood his ground. The wave swallowed Yang Kai up, and once it calmed down again, Yang Kai was nowhere to be seen. Yang Kai felt everything turning upside down. He felt both weightless and as if he was falling off a cliff. He quickly used his power to steady himself. Immediately, his expression changed. In a flash, he had suddenly become impossibly weak. Although his small universe was still there, he seemed to have lost contact with it and could not use his world force. There was also only a bit of qi left in him. Yang Kai had to scramble around before he could somewhat slow down the rate of his fall, but he could not steady himself at all. He looked down and saw a lush, verdant forest below him, one that was quickly getting closer. A melancholic thought flashed across Yang Kai's mind. Am I going to be the first 9th order master to die by falling to his death? He had been too careless. Initially, he thought that Mu's space-time river had to possess some kind of secret, so he did not try to dodge the wave that came at him. He wanted to enter the river and scout it out from the inside. However, he never thought he would end up in such a strange place after being swallowed up by the wave. Soon, he fell into the forest. Numerous branches cushioned his fall and slowed him down a little, but they could not break his fall entirely. Moments later, there was a loud thud as Yong Kai dropped to the ground, creating a small crater in the process. The commotion scared off the birds and the critters, and soon everything fell silent. A little while later, Yong Kai was finally able to straighten himself up. He sat on the ground and shook his head. There was nothing much wrong with him. He did feel a little dizzy, but it was most likely because he had been plunged into this unknown space rather than because of the fall. He belatedly realized that he was still a divine dragon. Even though he could not use his dragon veins power right now, his thick skin and strong flesh meant that he would not die from such a fall, even if it had been from an even greater height. Still, he was under a lot of pressure from the sudden turn of events and was a little dazed. What is this place? Yong Kai's brow furrowed as he looked around, narrowing his eyes a moment later. He was only certain that he was inside Mu's space-time river right now, and he was astonished to find that such a world existed inside the space-time river. His space-time river did not contain anything as profound as this. From the looks of it now, the images I saw in Mu's space-time river when I was standing outside it earlier weren't images at all, but reflections of this world, the infinite river universe world. Yong Kai was beginning to get some ideas. He sorely wished he could enter retreat to digest the new information. However, now was not the time for that. The place he was in did not seem to be all that peaceful. His cultivation was being suppressed, and his divine sense was suppressed to remain inside his knowledge sea. So it meant that he only possessed the barest hint of his powers right now. What's more, after all his years of travels and experiences, Yong Kai could keenly sense that he was not alone in the forest right now. A strange murderous intent hung thick in the air as unseen pairs of eyes were fixed on him. Yong Kai lowered his gaze as he silently checked what strength he still had. One day, a crack will appear in the sky and a man will fall from it. He will spark the light and rip apart the shackles of darkness. He will defeat the ultimate enemy. Somewhere in the forest, a man was staring dazedly at Yong Kai. He muttered those words under his breath, and as he did so, an indescribable look of feverish passion filled his expression. Two others beside him looked just as ecstatic when they heard what he said and saw the disheveled Yong Kai. "You two, get him out of here. I'll bring up the rear." The person who spoke first quickly came to a decision, and after giving this order, he gripped his sword and charged out of his hiding spot. The other two people quickly followed close behind. As the three of them started moving, the murderous intent that circled the forest grew even stronger as silhouettes fluttered in the shadows. Yong Kai looked up, and his brow rose slightly when he saw the man rushing over to him with a sword in hand. After a quick check, Yong Kai confirmed what cultivation he had right now. He, a Ninth Order master, was only able to use true element boundary strength. What outrageous suppression! The journey of cultivation began with the tempered body stage before continuing to the initial element chi transformation, separation, and reunion true element. Immortal ascension, even back in the Great Han Dynasty, Yong Kai's cultivation had surpassed the true element boundary. However, he was being suppressed to that exact realm by an independent world now. That explains why I couldn't use my divine sense. I'm not even in the immortal ascension realm right now. Only cultivators who reached the immortal ascension realm could use divine sense. The young man who came charging over at Yong Kai with a sword in hand appeared to be less than 30 years old. He had a determined look on his scarred face and seemed like someone who had wrestled with death before. His cultivation was also somewhere in the true element boundary, but his murderous aura was strong, and he had a mysterious movement skill that allowed him to rush over to Yong Kai in just a few steps. Yong Kai eyed him without moving. He could sense that the young man's murderous intent was not directed at him. Although he looked fierce when he came storming over, there was also a look of worry as well. Why is this guy worried about me when we don't know each other? Two younger men followed close behind the first one, seemingly part of the same group. All at once, the scar-faced young man thrust his sword towards Yang Kai. The sword cry was followed by a clang as it flicked away an arrow that was aimed at Yang Kai's back. The scar-faced man leapt past Yang Kai and protected him from behind, his sword dancing through the air. A series of clangs rang out as the young man blocked more arrows that were all directed at Yang Kai. Yang Kai had no idea what was going on. I've only just arrived in this damned place. How did I get caught up in a fight? One party is trying to protect me, while the other one is trying to kill me. Just how did I provoke them? What is going on inside Mu's space-time river? Yang Kai was bewildered in every way possible. Hurry up and leave. I can't hold them back for long. The growl from the scar-faced man interrupted Yang Kai's thoughts. Just then, the two men who rushed over with the first one hoisted Yang Kai up from the ground, and the one on his left quickly said, "Please come with us. Holy Son, Marshall Peak." Marshall Peak, Chapter 59:30. Prophecy. Marshall Peak saying so, they lifted Yang Kai and ran away without caring about whether he was willing or not. Holy Son. Yang Kai's confusion grew. Although the cultivation of these two people was not as good as the scar-faced man, their strength and movement skills were still impressive for their realm, as arrows rained down from behind. The two of them cooperated seamlessly, blocking attacks while carrying Yang Kai as they fled into the distance. Soon, a furious roar came from behind them. "Swawuyu, you court death. You all came for me, didn't you? Well then, let's fight to the death here. I'll hold him off, you guys run. No one is leaving." The scar-faced youth, Swawuyu, roared. Immediately, a fierce battle broke out behind them. Yang Kai furrowed his brow, looking at the situation with confusion. He wanted to inquire about it, but this was clearly not a good time. The title of Holy Son also caught his attention. He had only come to this mysterious and unknowable place to investigate the hidden hand left by Mu, but he never expected to be swept into Mu's space-time river and end up in this independent world where his strength was greatly suppressed. As a Ninth Order Master, he was not easily suppressed by the laws of any unfamiliar world. However, in this place, he could only exert the strength of a cultivator in the true element boundary. This meant that a stronger force was acting in this place, surpassing his Ninth Order power. This must be Mu's doing. Swift as the wind, Yang Kai was dragged along by the two young men as they moved forward quickly. Taking advantage of this opportunity, he checked the item in his palm that Wu Kuang had given him before entering this mysterious place. He hadn't had a chance to look at it before, but now he noticed that it was a jade pendant carved in the shape of a person that vaguely resembled Wu Kuang and carried a wisp of his aura. Yang Kai had a rough idea of what this item was for. Then he suddenly spoke up, "You two can put me down. I can walk on my own." Although he didn't know where they were or what had happened, being chased was definitely not a pleasant experience. The two young men should be on his side, as they were carrying him and running as fast as they could from the pursuers. Though their speed was somewhat affected, running faster would certainly help them shake off their pursuers. As he spoke, Yang Kai shook lightly and broke free from their grasp. The two youths were clearly surprised and pleased to see that Yang Kai had such strength. Then the youth on the left apologized. "We acted hastily and didn't handle things appropriately. Please forgive us, Holy Son." Yang Kai waved his hand nonchalantly. "It's fine." Later, the young man on the right said, "I didn't expect Holy Son to be so powerful. It seems we can get away from them now." As they spoke, they continued to rush forward. "What about the guy? Should we not worry about him?" Yang Kai remembered the scar-faced young man who remained behind. Big Brother Zwa is very strong, and he has a divine sword bestowed by the Saintess. Without an immortal Ascension Realm Master, those wastes can't do anything to him. Saintess? Yang Kai wondered what her role in all of this was, but with just a few words, he confirmed that the martial Tao of this world was not much different from what he knew. Even the names were the same. Moreover, this world had immortal Ascension Realm Masters. The only difference was that there were 3 stages instead of 9. As they fled for their lives, it was not convenient to say much. The 2 young men were initially worried that Yang Kai could not keep up with their speed, so they did not use their full strength at first. However, as time passed and they tested him, they found that no matter how profound their movement skills were, this holy sun, who had descended from the sky, could keep up with them effortlessly. So they let loose and ran at full speed. After about an hour, they reached a mountain wall, where one of them took out a jade ornament and pressed it against the wall, which opened a kind of portal. It seemed that this was their hiding place. The 3 of them entered one after another, and the portal closed again. There was a space that was just the right size inside the mountain, and the space had clearly been lived in before. After everything was settled, the 2 young men who led Yang Kai here breathed a sigh of relief. There was no need to worry about anything now that they were here. Yang Kai stood with his hands behind his back, surveying his surroundings. Suddenly, the 2 young men fell to one knee and bowed. "Greetings, Holy Sun," and Yang Kai hesitated for a moment before reaching out to help the 2 young men up. "I still haven't figured out what's going on here, and I have no idea who this Holy Sun is that you speak of. Are you sure you haven't mistaken me for someone else?" The thin youth replied, "We have not made a mistake. You are indeed the Holy Son of the Spirit Religion. Of course, the final determination will be made by the Saintess herself." Yang Kai was confused, "But we've never met before today. How can you be so sure?" The 2 exchanged a glance before the thin one explained. "It is said that one day a crack will appear in the sky and a man will fall from it. He will spark the light and rip apart the shackles of darkness to defeat the ultimate enemy. And that person will be the one who leads the Spirit Religion into the light. That person is the Holy Son of the Spirit Religion, descend from the sky." Yang Kai realized that they were probably talking about him. After all, he had indeed fallen from a crack in the sky in a rather undignified manner. It was surprising to find that their prophecy matched up with his own experience, to not only descend from the sky, but also do so while the sky is split open. "Who made this prophecy?" he asked. The other young man replied solemnly, "It is the guidance of the Saintess herself, passed down since the founding of the Spirit Religion." Yang Kai raised his eyebrows, intrigued. "Oh, can I meet this Saintess of yours?" "Of course," the thin youth said. "We'll wait here for a while until Big Brother's returns, and then we'll take you to see the Saintess." "Good." Then they rested in silence for a while. The 2 youths had been running nonstop, which had taken a toll on them, but Yang Kai, on the other hand, was still full of energy. Despite being suppressed to the true element boundary, he still had the heritage of the 9th Order Open Heaven realm. So running didn't tire him out. Taking advantage of the moment, he gripped the jade pendant in his hand, intending to activate his divine sense, but he quickly remembered that he couldn't do that right now. As a last resort, he could only call out softly, "Wu Kuang." The jade pendant had been given to him by Wu Kuang before he entered this place, and it was even carved in Wu Kuang's image and carried his aura. Obviously, it was meant for communication. Yang Kai also sensed that Wu Kuang had left a thread of his consciousness in this jade pendant. Wu Kuang seemed extremely curious about this mysterious and unknowable land, but because he was guarding the primordial heaven's source grand restriction and had no energy to spare, he could only send a thread of consciousness to see what was going on. The jade pendant shook slightly in response. Yang Kai became speechless. Even Wu Kuang's thread of consciousness seemed to be heavily suppressed here. He had originally wanted to communicate with him and see if he could find any useful clues, but now he had to give up. Moreover, just this shake caused the spirituality of the jade pendant to dim a bit. I'll have to nourish Wu Kuang's thread of consciousness. Otherwise, it will soon dissipate. Yang Kai reached out, only to remember another unfortunate truth. His small universe was currently sealed, causing him to not be able to take anything out. Now, he was practically empty-handed except for the clothes he was wearing. It was quite an awkward situation. Do either of you have some thread? Yang Kai asked, looking at them. Yes, one of them responded quickly and handed him a carefully braided thread. Then, Yang Kai tied Wu Kuang's jade pendant into a kind of necklace, so he could nurture it with his own spiritual energy and communicate with Wu Kuang at any time. After that, he began to familiarize himself with his current powers. True element boundary. How weak! His great power had been stripped away, making him somewhat uncomfortable. But in the end, he had experienced this realm before, so he just needed to familiarize himself with it a little bit. About an hour later, there was a sudden commotion. The three of them were alerted, and when Yang Kai looked, he saw one of the two youths using a jade to investigate, and then exclaimed with joy, "Big Brother's was back." Saying so, he activated his power of the jade, and a light flashed by, opening the sealed portal. In the next moment, Zhuo Wuyu, covered in blood, hurried in. He had clearly experienced a fierce battle, with many wounds on his body and a somewhat weakened aura, but his murderous intent remained extremely strong. The figure that entered this place was like an ancient, ominous beast entering a cave, chilling the atmosphere to the bone. "Big Brother Zhuo!" The two youths exclaimed and greeted him. As Zhuo Wuyu glanced over and fixed his gaze on Yang Kai, he breathed a sigh of relief. Only then did he wave his hand to his two companions, and went straight to Yang Kai, kneeling on one knee. Zhuo Wuyu pays his respects to the Holy Sun. Here we go again. Yang Kai, a majestic Ninth Order master with the body of a divine dragon, didn't mind being bowed to by a mere true element boundary cultivator. However, this Holy Sun identity was somewhat strange to him. He had only come to investigate what Mu's hidden hand was, never expecting to get involved in the petty disputes of this inexplicable world. Reaching out to help him up, Yang Kai spoke, "Let me greet your saintess before we discuss this matter of the Holy Sun." Upon hearing this, Zhuo Wuyu knew that the person before him had already heard of the saintess prophecy, so he immediately spoke up. The saintess has never made a mistake. When the Holy Sun appears, it is no doubt per her guidance. Therefore, you must be the Holy Sun of spirit religion. Yang Kai didn't bother to argue, and simply said, "You're injured. You should focus on healing first. This time, I owe you a debt of gratitude." Even without Zhuo Wuyu and his companions, nothing would have happened to Yang Kai in the face of that group of attackers that hadn't even reached the immortal ascension boundary. However, they had still protected him and provided cover, so he should show his gratitude. Zhuo Wuyu shook his head with a bitter smile. "This matter was aimed at me, but I have dragged the Holy Sun into it. I am ashamed." Sullivan, the only difference was that there were 3 stages instead of 9. I added this to make it fit what the author wrote later. Marshall Peak. Marshall Peak, Chapter 5931. Pursue. Marshall Peak, in the midst of the jungle ambush that was aimed at Zhuo Wuyu himself, Yang Kai just so happened to be at the right place at the right time. No one could have predicted that at that critical moment, the arrival of the spirit religion Holy Sun, guided by fate, would cause all the undercurrents to erupt in an instant. Upon reflection, Yang Kai realized that Zhuo Wuyu had indeed shouted to the attackers, "Aren't you here for me?" "Regardless, I still have to thank you," Yang Kai said. Zhuo Wuyu shook his head. "Holy Sun, it's nothing. However, we shouldn't stay here for long. We need to leave as soon as possible." Although he had killed quite a number of enemies, he was ultimately alone and unable to completely wipe them out. Before the news of the appearance of the Holy Sun was spread, they had already taken Zhuo Wuyu seriously, but it was not to the point where they had to eliminate him at all costs. However, if news of the Holy Sun's appearance got out, it would surely lead to an all-out attack. But Brother Zhuo, your injury. The thin young man looked at Zhuo Wuyu with concern. It's nothing serious. Escort the Holy Sun. Before Zhuo Wuyu could even finish his sentence, he suddenly coughed up a mouthful of blood, his aura wilting to the extreme, and his face turning an ashen white. Big Brother Zhuo! The two young men exclaimed, rushing to support Zhuo Wuyu, who was now swaying on his feet. Yang Kai looked at him and said, "It looks like we'll have to hide here for a while." Zhuo Wuyu's face was filled with bitterness as he nodded. "Please wait half a day for me." Holy Sun! Yang Kai did not respond. Zhuo Wuyu needed urgent treatment. The battle just now had taken a huge toll on him, but he forcibly suppressed his injuries out of concern for the Holy Sun's safety and the future of the spirit religion. Now that the backlash had acted up, though, he was unable to move for a while. Zhuo Wuyu quickly settled down and closed his eyes to meditate and heal. The two young men who had brought Yang Kai here stood guard by his side, while Yang Kai himself seemed to have nothing to do. Currently, he still had very little information at his disposal, but one thing was certain: this independent world was still inside Mu's space-time river. When the waves of the space-time river crashed down on him, Yang Kai did not dodge, resulting in him being dragged into this place and fulfilling an unknown prophecy of some spirit religion saintess who lived in this place. The current situation required Yang Kai to see the saintess if he wanted to know more. Although he had some guesses in mind, he couldn't confirm them until he met her. However, there were still some minor troubles to solve before that. The hideout fell silent after that. About 4 hours later, a commotion suddenly broke out. Zhuo Wuyu, who was meditating to heal, suddenly opened his eyes with a look of disbelief and exclaimed, "Impossible!" As soon as the words fell, a tremor shook the ground, as if someone outside was using powerful means to attack the mountain wall where the secret chamber was located. "Big Brother Zhuo!" cried the thin young man. "Our location has been exposed, and those guys have come after us." Upon hearing that, Zhuo Wuyu's expression darkened. This secret chamber was one of the spirit religion's footholds outside, and when he returned earlier, he had carefully investigated the surroundings to ensure that he wasn't being followed. So, how did the enemy find them? If he hadn't been certain that this foothold was safe enough, he wouldn't have stayed here to heal his injuries. But in fact, the enemy had already found them. "Hurry! Activate the array!" Zhuo Wuyu shouted. Another young man immediately took out a control jade, infused it with power, and shielded the hideout. The attacks became more ferocious, and the commotion grew much louder. "Zhuo Wuyu, this king knows you're in there. Hand over your Holy Sun, and this king will spare your life." Zhuo Wuyu paled upon hearing the voice. Yan Peng, that old dog, really came here in person. He, who remained calm when he was being besieged in the jungle previously, panicked now, clearly facing a formidable foe at the moment. It was obvious that this Yan Peng was not someone to be trifled with. After waiting for half a moment without a response, Yan Peng outside coldly snorted, "Since you refuse a toast, you must drink a forfeit. Don't blame this king for being ruthless." As he finished speaking, the violent attacks resumed, causing the entire secret chamber to shake violently. The young man holding the control jade and stimulating the protective array stumbled as well, nervously saying, "Big Brother Zhuo, the array can't hold on for much longer." With that, Zhuo Wuyu immediately stood up and drew his sword before taking a deep breath and declaring, "Zhenghai, Luji, I'll clear a path for you. Bring the Holy Sun and run." "Big Brother Zhuo, we can't escape," said the thin youth. "Zhenghai, full of sorrow and indignation, "We should fight together." Zhuo Wuyu's eyes flickered with a hint of sadness. He knew very well that they couldn't escape, but after so many years of persistence, how could he give up now that he had finally seen a glimmer of hope? He gritted his teeth and said, "Listen up, you two. No matter what happens, you must protect the Holy Sun and bring him back safely. Don't give up until the very end." Hong 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 as rocks crumbled and fell, it was clear that this secret chamber couldn't hold much longer. So Wu Yu held his sword up, his expression was resolute and determined. Lu Ji continued to wield the power of the jade, while Zheng Hai stood ready with all his strength, preparing to unleash his strongest move. Suddenly, Zheng Hai punched Lu Ji in the back, and, at the same time, the hidden dagger in his other hand struck at Yang Kai's vital point. What? Two exclamations sounded almost simultaneously. The situation in the secret chamber became confusing and chaotic. Lu Ji, who was hit by the punch, spat out fresh blood and fell to the side. So Wu Yu couldn't help but turn his head in disbelief. He never expected to have a traitor on his side, especially one who would turn on them at such a critical moment. Finally, he understood why their position had been exposed. The enemy had hidden Zheng Hai, a traitor, deep within the spirit religion for years without ever using him. Now that it involved the existence of the Holy Sun, though, it was time to activate this agent. What surprised Suo Wu Yu even more was what happened when Zheng Hai attacked Yang Kai. He timed his attack perfectly, just as the spirit array was about to collapse, and when everyone was highly focused due to the tension. Lu Ji was already injured by him, and Yang Kai, standing not far from him without any defenses, should have been directly killed by him. However, when his dagger was about to reach Yang Kai, it was caught between two fingers that suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Throughout the entire process, the Holy Sun didn't even turn his head, yet he seemed to have eyes on the back of his head. Hong, with no one to maintain the array, it collapsed, and the secret chamber hidden in the mountain was completely exposed. Figures outside could be seen, and one of them, a white-haired old man with a ruddy complexion, stood with his hands behind his back while raising a gust of wind to clear away the dust to make the confusing situation clearer. After scanning the scene, the white-haired old man snorted coldly. So Wu Yu's roar resounded, "Zheng Hai!" With a flick of the sword in his hand, he turned and thrust towards Zheng Hai, his eyes filled with bloodshot veins and anger, and his face twisted in a grimace of disappointment for his former comrade. Silence. Yen Peng, the white-haired old man, waved his sleeves and sent Suo Wu Yu flying through the air, smashing into the ground several paces away, already heavily injured and weakened. The impact of the throw left him nearly unconscious, with no strength left even to move a finger. Desperately looking towards Yang Kai, he expected to see the Holy Sun's tragic state, but what he saw left him stunned instead. Zheng Hai held a dagger close to the Holy Sun's waist with a posture of attempting a sneak attack, but the Holy Sun quickly countered by catching the dagger with two fingers and holding it in place. Right now, Zheng Hai was struggling to pull the dagger out, but those two fingers were as steady as a rock, making his efforts futile. What is happening? Suo Wu Yu couldn't make sense of it. From the looks of it, the Holy Sun seemed to have anticipated this sneak attack. While he was wondering how the Holy Sun could have been prepared for this, the latter spoke up. "There really was an issue with you." Saying so, he turned to look at Zheng Hai behind him, perhaps feeling guilty, or perhaps intimidated by Yang Kai's strength. Zheng Hai tried to put on a tough act and asked, "How did you figure it out?" "During our escape, you were clearly leaving some things behind in secret. I thought they were meant to guide Suo Wu Yu, but then I thought, if Suo Wu Yu already knew about these places, who else could you be guiding?" The Holy Sun replied, "How is that possible? You notice what I did on the way here?" Zheng Hai couldn't believe it. He had been very careful, and even Lu Ji hadn't noticed anything. Yang Kai chuckled lightly without answering. Instead, he looked down at Zheng Hai's hand and said, "You're still a bit weak compared to me." This whole time, Zheng Hai had been trying to retrieve his dagger, but he couldn't overpower Holy Sun's grip. Upon hearing this, he immediately released the dagger and stepped back. However, as soon as he regained his footing, his face became filled with horror as the Holy Sun appeared to use some mysterious movement skill, clinging to him like maggots on rotting bones. Just as he was about to say something, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his chest, and all his strength rapidly drained from his body. Yang Kai turned his head towards Zhu Wuyu, who lay helpless on the ground, and asked, "It doesn't matter if we kill this traitor, does it?" Zhu Wuyu was dumbfounded by the series of events, but upon hearing this, he laughed heartily. "He's just a beast. His death isn't worth pitying." Amidst the hearty laughter, he was suddenly seized with a coughing fit that aggravated his injury. Yang Kai nodded slightly and reached out to lightly tap Shanghai's forehead, who then stumbled backwards and fell to the ground. Gazing down at his chest, a dagger was somehow thrust into his heart, the very same one he had used to ambush the Holy Sun from before. "Impossible!" Shanghai's pupils contracted as he murmured to himself, "How is that possible that I'm dying here?" His head tilted, and he lost his aura. Only then did Yang Kai turn to look at Yen Peng, who was observing him with a scrutinizing gaze, looking somewhat surprised. Yang Kai said, "Old man, aren't you angry?" "Angry about what?" he asked in confusion. "I just killed one of your subordinates." Yang Kai pointed to Shanghai, who lay dead next to them. Yen Peng burst into laughter. "I have thousands of subordinates. If I were to get mad every time one dies, I'd have died from anger by now." Marshall Peak. Marshall Peak, Chapter 5932, missed Marshall Peak. Yang Kai pondered for a moment before nodding. "That makes sense." Yen Peng scrutinized Yang Kai and asked, "Are you the legendary Holy Sun?" "I'm not sure," Yang Kai replied as he agilely maneuvered through the rubble, quickly arriving before Zhu Wuyu and looking down at him. Zhu Wuyu's lips moved, and he appeared to be mouthing the word, "Run," flashing a smile. Yang Kai reached out to grab the long sword in his hand. "Let me borrow this." Yen Peng didn't stop him, but curiously asked, "What are you going to do?" Yang Kai paid him no attention as he examined the sword in his hand. On their escape route, Zheng Hai mentioned that this sword was a divine weapon bestowed upon the Sanus, but in Yang Kai's eyes, it was an ordinary weapon that didn't even qualify to be called a proper artifact. This wasn't surprising, though, as this was a world with a relatively low martial Dao, so there were no truly powerful artifacts. "I just asked what you were doing." Yen Peng was starting to get annoyed by Yang Kai's dismissive attitude. Yang Kai flicked the sword with his finger to hear its clear and melodious cry. Only then did he turn his head to look at Yen Peng and smiled. "I'm getting ready to fight. With so many of you, I obviously need to find a suitable weapon." They were already surrounded by enemies in all directions. It was evident that Yen Peng took this matter seriously, since he had brought over 30 people with him. Yen Peng narrowed his eyes. "We don't necessarily have to fight." "Oh." Yang Kai raised his eyebrow. "Are you willing to let us go?" "You can't go, but they can, because I'm the Holy Sun." "Yes. The prophecy of the light spirit religion has been circulating for many years. Everyone thinks it's an unrealistic fantasy. Whether you are the real Holy Sun or not, you still have to come with me. Rest assured, our master may not necessarily take your life. Who knows, you might even benefit from this misfortune." Yang Kai looked at him curiously and asked, "If I'm not mistaken, you should be in the immortal ascension boundary, right? An elite like you actually has a master?" Upon hearing that, Yen Peng's eyes were suddenly filled with fanaticism. "Of course, the divine might of our master is not something that you ordinary mortals can imagine. I am not even 1/10 of his greatness." Watching the fervent expression on Yen Peng's face, Yang Kai suddenly felt a sense of familiarity. Yang Kai still wanted to say more, but Yen Peng had already lost his patience. The fanaticism in his eyes subsided, replaced by coldness and cruelty. "Boy, you better come with me obediently to avoid suffering." "That's not going to happen," Yang Kai shook his head like a rattledrum. I'm curious about that prophecy, so I intend to meet their saintess and ask about it. Yen Peng coldly snorted, foolish obstinance. With a wave of his hand, he shouted, Take him down! Yang Kai lifted the sword up as he muttered, It's a pity it's not a spear, but oh well, it's all the same. With those words, he flicked his wrist, and blood spurted forth as one of the masters who charged towards him was inexplicably pierced, clutching his throat while he stumbled backwards. Yang Kai thrust his sword again, and another person was killed with one swift blow. Masters came from all directions, but Yang Kai moved like a graceful butterfly amid their dense attacks. Within just a few breaths, the ground was covered with corpses, and more than half of Yen Peng's men were dead. The remaining people were filled with horror and no longer dared to approach. Zhu Wuyu, who had collapsed on a pile of rubble, stared straight ahead, momentarily forgetting to breathe. On the other side, Lu Ji also widened his eyes and almost thought that he was dreaming. Yen Peng was equally astonished and asked, What kind of sword secret technique is this? Under his observation, this holy son of the light spirit religion did not even use any kind of great force. The sword in his hand seemed to have a mind of its own, piercing with precision every time and always hitting its target. After just a dozen or so strikes, half of his men were already dead. However, the sword remained unsullied by blood. Sword's secret technique? Yang Kai shook his sword and said, No, this is not a secret technique. Not a secret technique? Then what is it? It's just an application of the sword Tao. Although Yang Kai mainly cultivated the Tao of space, time, and spear, he had delved into the sword Tao before. In his earlier years, when he wasn't powerful enough, he roamed around with only a sword. However, since the war in the Star Boundary, after receiving the Azure Dragon Spear from he had switched to Spear Tao. Now, with the gains he had obtained from the Great Sea, Celestial Phenomenon, and Infinite River, compared to ordinary masters, Yang Kai was still much stronger, despite his mastery over the sword Tao being lower than the 3 grand Taos he primarily cultivated. In Yang Kai's small universe, many people benefited from his unusual accumulation and embarked on the sword Tao, making it among the most popular grand Taos in the entire void world. Although his power was severely suppressed in this independent world, which made it difficult to use his Tao strengths, his mastery of the sword Tao remained. With just a flick of his wrist, he could perform an extremely exquisite move with any kind of sword. Yen Peng and Zhu Wuyu found this all hard to comprehend. Now, who wants to die next? Yang Kai looked around at the masters who were now at a loss. No one dared to step forward. A mere true element boundary junior dares to act insolent in front of this old master? Even if your sword secret techniques are exquisite, you are not my match. Yen Peng bellowed with rage as his divine sense surged, sending his spiritual energy charging towards Yang Kai. Zhu Wuyu's expression changed drastically as he shouted, Holy Sun, be careful. While the Holy Sun's sword secret techniques were truly transcendent, his cultivation realm was still a fatal weakness. There was an insurmountable gap between the true element boundary and the immortal ascension boundary. One's divine sense and knowledge see. The latter had given birth to a divine sense and opened their knowledge see, but the former had not. Therefore, an immortal ascension masters who wanted to make a move against a true element cultivator were basically unstoppable, unless they wore some artifact that protected their soul. After Yen Peng witnessed Yang Kai's skills and realized he could not understand his sword's secret techniques, he understood that if he wanted to take him down, he could only use soul secret techniques. In an instant, Yen Peng's spiritual energy rushed into Yang Kai's knowledge sea and manifested as a soul avatar. He stood proudly above the ocean, his arrogance and disdain quickly turning to shock and doubt. This is a knowledge sea. How could a true element boundary cultivator have a knowledge sea? Moreover, The vast power hidden within this knowledge, C was beyond his ability to comprehend. The soul of the immortal Ascension Master was like a firefly under the bright moonlight in front of such power. What was going on? The prophecy predicting the Holy Sun's existence did not seem to be unfounded. Putting aside his bizarre sword's secret techniques, this vast and boundless knowledge, C was even more astonishing. Yen Peng quickly discovered a 7-color island, which stood out among the vast and misty multicolored lights of the knowledge sea. Yen Peng could feel his soul avatar trembling just from looking at it. He instinctively knew that the 7-colored island was an incredible treasure. Just being bathed by the 7-colored glow gave his soul avatar an extremely pleasant feeling. I must obtain this 7-colored island. With greed in his heart, Yen Peng flew towards the island and landed on it easily as there was no hindrance on the way. In an instant, Yen Peng felt an indescribable surge of power nourishing his soul, giving him a feeling of returning to the womb. He wished he could stay here forever. Suddenly, a voice rang out. It's been a long time since I've seen someone so weak. Yen Peng was startled. Someone's here? He spun around to see a young man standing beside a leopard that had lightning dancing around it. Was it the leopard who spoke earlier? The young man commented, "We all start weak and work our way up through cultivation." The leopard just sneered. This old man's aptitude is so poor that even if he were placed in the wider world, he would only be able to reach the first order at best. Fair enough. In any case, let's get this over with. What do you think, second brother? Instead of just killing him, we should probably try to gather some more information. Good. Then you do it. I'm not good at delicate work, so I'm afraid I might kill him by accident. And the young man nodded and turned to Yen Peng, smiling. Old man, if you don't want to suffer, you'd better tell us everything you know. The heavens reward those who are kind, so I might spare you if you cooperate. Yen Peng's expression turned grave. Meanwhile, amidst the rubble, Zhuo Wuyu yelled out in worry, but in the next instant, the Holy Sun's sword flickered again as he began killing all the enemies who surrounded them. Blood splattered, and screams filled the air. No one expected that after Yen Peng attacked, Yang Kai could still fight. Normally, at this point, Yang Kai's soul should have been crushed by Yen Peng, leaving him either dead or severely limited. But in reality, Yang Kai remained unfazed. A moment of carelessness resulted in even greater casualties. It wasn't until only a few people were left alive that they realized what was happening. Kill him! Kill him now! The few people exclaimed in shock as a layer of faint mist suddenly filled their bodies. As the mist spread, their strength noticeably improved. Yang Kai, who was in the midst of wielding his sword and killing, suddenly raised his brow, revealing a look of astonishment. The sword in his hand continued to deliver death, and within moments, only the last master remained gasping for breath, while the rest lay dead on the ground. By the time Yang Kai cut the tendons in the last master's shoulders with his sword and captured him with one hand, the several dozen people brought by Yen Peng were already all dead. Be careful. Holy Sun, don't touch that mist. Zhuo Wuyu's worried voice rang out once again. Yang Kai, however, seemed not to have heard him. He continued to pressure the master he had captured, forcing him to activate the power of the mist. After a while, Yang Kai finally stopped, and the captive master's aura extinguished at the same time. Standing in place, Yang Kai showed a pensive expression. That mist was lacking strength, though incredibly faint and weak, unlike those outside. It was still undoubtedly lacking strength. Recalling Yen Peng's previously fanatical expression, Yang Kai suddenly realized why it seemed familiar. Do all of these people possess this power? Yang Kai turned to Zhuo Wuyu and asked. Zhuo Wuyu replied, "Those in the black ink cult all possess it. It's called blacking strength." Yang Kai nodded, finally obtaining a few answers after experiencing this series of inexplicable events. Marshall Peak. Marshall Peak, Chapter 59:33, Information. Marshall Peak, in this world, black ink strength existed, as did the black ink cult, an opposing force to the light spirit religion. Holy Son, black ink strength is highly corruptive and can warp a human's nature. Please check whether you have been affected. Swawuyu anxiously warned. Yang Kai merely shrugged. Even black ink strength wielded by a royal lord couldn't harm him, let alone the extremely diluted power possessed by someone from the black ink cult. Although his small universe was currently suppressed and sealed, making it impossible for him to use his world force, the World Tree clone was still there. Moreover, with the protection of the soul-warming lotus, he was essentially immune to the effects of black ink strength. Still, it was a thoughtful warning. So Yang Kai went through the motions of checking himself before saying, "It's fine. This black ink strength seems to have no effect on me." Upon hearing that, Swawuyu and Lu Ji breathed a sigh of relief. Their attention then turned to Yen Peng, who stood motionless to the side. Ever since this immortal Ascension Boundary Master had used his soul avatar earlier, he became frozen in place, and even the death of a large number of his subordinates aroused no reaction from him, as if he had lost his soul. It made Swawuyu and Lu Ji puzzled. "Holy Son, what's happening to Yen Peng?" Swawuyu asked, uncertain but with a suspicion forming in his mind. "His soul has been shattered. He's basically a living corpse now," Yang Kai explained. Swawuyu was shocked. "Holy Son, do you possess one of those special constitutions that are immune to all evil?" The fact that Yen Peng's soul shattered as a result of his using his soul avatar against Yang Kai, coupled with his resistance to black ink strength, left Swawuyu at a loss for words with no explanation of what just happened. Something like that. As Yang Kai was thinking about how to explain it, Swawuyu was thoughtful enough to come up with an explanation for him. Seeing him admit to it, Swawuyu and Lu Ji exchanged a glance, both thrilled beyond measure. The Holy Son was impervious to all evil, born to counteract the means of the black ink cult. He was truly the future hope of the spirit religion. The saint's prophecy was right on the mark. Furthermore, his strength was unfathomable. He didn't even need to use much power in his previous killing spree, only employing the most basic sword secret techniques. Yet, the black ink cult masters were unable to block even a single strike. At this moment, the gloom in their hearts was illuminated by the dawn's light. "We shouldn't stay here for long," Swawuyu said, struggling to stand up before falling back down. His injuries were still severe. It was the same for Lu Ji. He was caught off guard by Zheng Hai and took a direct punch to the back. If Zheng Hai hadn't reserved some strength to attack Yang Kai, that punch would have ended Lu Ji's life. "You should both rest and recover for a while," said Yang Kai. Swawuyu looked bitter. Although he wanted to leave this dangerous place as soon as possible, he was strong in will but weak in strength. After exchanging a glance with Lu Ji, he decided to heal his injuries on the spot and try to restore some strength for now. Inside Yang Kai's knowledge sea, on the seven-colored island, Yen Peng's soul avatar became respectful and forthcoming before the young man and the Thunder Leopard. He would answer any questions they had without holding anything back. This couldn't be helped. Yen Peng initially thought this seven-colored island was his great opportunity, never expecting to find two masters here whose strengths were both beyond his imagination. Yen Peng did not doubt that either of these two could extinguish his soul with a single thought. How could people under the eaves not lower their heads? Fortunately, the young man was kind enough not to harm him, only asking for some basic information. So, Yen Peng cooperated obediently. After a brief exchange, Feng Tianci uncovered some secrets of this world, which he naturally shared with the others. In the primordial world, two great forces, the light spirit religion and the black ink cult, had vied for dominance since ancient times, each claiming half of this independent world. Even after years of unending conflict, neither side could gain the upper hand. Within the black ink cult, there was a black ink master who could bestow black ink strength upon all living beings, corrupting their hearts and minds, making them obedient servants of the cult. Meanwhile, the light spirit religion was the only force that could stand against the black ink cult. They had been battling them for countless years. Without them, the entire world would have fallen into the hands of the cult long ago. The first generation saintess of the light spirit religion left behind a prophecy, which was the same one that Yang Kai heard from Lu Ji. Over the years, the followers of the light spirit religion had been searching for the whereabouts of the Holy Sun while fighting against the black ink cult, because according to the guidance of the first generation saintess, the only way to completely defeat the black ink cult was for the Holy Sun to appear. Likewise, the black ink cult was also searching for the whereabouts of the Holy Sun of the light spirit religion. Unfortunately, neither side had made any progress. Until today, during the black ink cult's hunt for Zhuo Wuyu, Yang Kai suddenly descended from the sky. When the news reached Yen Peng, he personally led his men to capture Yang Kai, but things took an unexpected turn as they were all slaughtered, and Yen Peng found himself trapped on the small island. Fong Tianci continued to question Yen Peng for more information. Meanwhile, in front of the ruins, Yang Kai fell into deep thought. The information he had was not extensive, but he now had a general understanding of the situation. However, there were two things that were different from what he had initially thought. The first was the impact of black ink strength on living creatures. In the outside world, black ink strength was extremely potent. Any master who was contaminated by it and failed to deal with it in time would inevitably become a black ink disciple. These beings had long since abandoned their humanity and identities and became loyal only to Mo. It could be said that any black ink disciple would willingly sacrifice everything they had for Mo. However, Yen Peng was different. Though his soul avatar was trapped on the seven-color island, he had a strong will to survive. Otherwise, he wouldn't have cooperated with Fong Tianci and provided so much information about the black ink cult. In other words, he wasn't a true black ink disciple. Is it because of how weak the black ink strength is here? When Yang Kai killed those black ink cult members before, the last few activated their black ink strength to enhance their abilities. However, their black ink strength was extremely thin and clearly abnormal. It seemed that black ink strength in the primordial world could distort someone's nature to a certain extent, but it wasn't potent enough to transform them into true black ink disciples. The second point of curiosity was the saintess of the light spirit religion. Yang Kai had a suspicion about the saintess before, but after learning some information about her from Yen Peng, he began thinking he might have been wrong. The prophecy was left behind by the first generation saintess of the light spirit religion. Since then, the light spirit religion had gone through many generations of saintesses. Among the past saintesses, some were assassinated by the black ink cult, some experienced cultivation dissonance, and some naturally died when their predestined time arrived. If that was the case, then this light spirit religion's current saintess was not the person he wanted to meet. Another thing that caught Yang Kai's attention was the name of this world, primordial world. The name of this world seemed to imply something. Yang Kai felt helpless. Although Mu had left a hidden hand in the primordial heaven's source grand restriction, it was still elusive. He had to clear the fog in front of him before he could glimpse the truth. "It's time to go," he said after half a day. Since Yen Peng personally took action, the black ink cult would certainly send more masters to investigate the situation once there was no news from him for long enough. In fact, according to the information revealed by Yen Peng, he was able to arrive so quickly only because he happened to be nearby. The other black ink cult masters should also have set out and were on their way. The appearance of the Holy Sun of the light spirit religion, even if it was only a possibility, was a matter that the black ink cult would not take lightly. Together, Zhuo Yu and Lu Ji opened their eyes. Half a day of rest was not enough to completely heal, but they had gained enough strength to move at the very least. Yang Kai raised his hand and threw the long sword back to Zhuo Wuyu. Zhuo Wuyu caught the sword and spoke. Only in the hands of the Holy Sun can this sword unleash its true power. Yang Kai's swift and efficient movements were all observed by him, which left him in awe, and realized that if he could enter retreat and comprehend these secret techniques, he would surely bring his sword techniques to the next level. Yang Kai shook his head casually. No need. I'll use this. With a flick of his foot, a long spear lying on the ground flew into his hand. He wasn't sure which dead black ink cultist it belonged to, but after giving it a quick shake, he was satisfied with how it felt in his hand, despite it being not the best of quality. Without saying anything more, Zhuo Wuyu approached Yan Peng and swiftly beheaded him with his sword. Then the three of them set off in a certain direction under Zhuo Wuyu's guidance. When they left, all that remained were dead bodies and destruction. An hour later, a group of beasts attracted by the scent of blood arrived, but soon became alert and fled after a brief hesitation. Suddenly, a blood-red line shot through the air and pierced one of the beasts, causing it to cry out in agony and turn into a lifeless husk. The blood-red line transformed into a blood-red light, from which a figure strolled out. The figure was a woman in tight red robes, her stunning physique accentuated by the vivid color of her clothes. Her nails were long and sharp as blades, and she licked her lips with satisfaction after the recent kill, her eyes curved with pleasure. Dozens of people had already gathered around, examining the remnants of the battle. After a while, the woman spoke up casually, still filing her nails as if sharpening a blade for herself. Anything noteworthy? Someone quickly knelt down and respectfully replied, "Chapter Master." All of them died from sword injuries, killed by a single strike. Even Yan Peng seemed to have put up no resistance before he died. Oh, the woman showed a hint of surprise, so Yan Peng didn't even try to fight back. Looks like there were some extremely powerful swordsmen among them. Was it Zhuo Wuyu? It couldn't have been Zhuo Wuyu. He's only in the true element boundary, while Yan Peng is in the immortal ascension boundary. With a difference of a major realm, Zhuo Wuyu couldn't have been responsible, the black ink cult disciple explained. So it must have been their newfound holy son. The woman raised an eyebrow. I don't know, Chapter Master, which way did they go? It should be that way. The man pointed in a direction. Immediately, the woman's body flickered, turning into a blood beam, which shot towards that direction. Her voice echoed in the distance. I'll go on ahead. You guys catch up as soon as possible. Marshall Peak. Marshall Peak, Chapter 5934. Why did you try to kill me? Marshall Peak, as the three of them passed through a small town, so Wu Yu and Yang Kai waited outside in concealment while Lu Ji entered and drove out in a carriage moments later. All three of them were in the true element boundary and were technically capable of flying. However, doing so would consume too much energy and be unsustainable for long periods. Besides, with Zhuo Wuyu and Lu Ji still recovering from their injuries, the natural choice was to use a carriage as transportation. Once they regrouped, Lu Ji nodded lightly to Zhuo Wuyu. It's arranged, Big Brother Zhuo. Zhuo Wuyu nodded in response before turning to Yang Kai. Please get on. Holy Sun. Yang Kai went along with them and got on the carriage with Zhuo Wuyu while Lu Ji continued to drive, the carriage rattling away from the small town. Inside the carriage, Yang Kai asked, "Where are we going now?" Dawn City. Zhuo Wuyu replied. Yang Kai understood why they were going there. According to Yan Peng's information, Dawn City was the foundation of the Light Spirit religion, with countless masters and high-ranking officials of the Light Spirit religion gathered there. Now that the Holy Sun had appeared, it was imperative to send him to Dawn City as soon as possible. However, the name of the city brought a sense of familiarity to Yang Kai. reminding him of the days when he fought side by side with his squad members on the Black Ink battlefield. Today, many of those familiar names and figures had vanished into the river of history. They were still quite far away from Dawn City, and judging by their current pace, it would take them 5 or 6 days to arrive even if they traveled day and night without rest. What's more, this long journey was highly unlikely to be peaceful. So Wu Yu clearly knew this, so he quickly focused on healing his injuries. Shortly after the three of them left the small town, a blood light arrived. Moments later, the blood light rushed out and turned into the figure of the red-robed woman. She stood in the void, gazing in the direction of the departing carriage as she coldly snorted, "I wonder what the legendary Holy Sun tastes like." With those murmured words, she turned into a bloody beam of light again and chased after Yang Kai and the others. Behind them, the small town lay eerily silent. Half a day later, Yang Kai in the carriage suddenly heard a commotion. So Wu Yu, who was meditating, was also alarmed and quickly opened his eyes, lifting the carriage curtain to ask, "What's going on?" When he looked out, he clearly saw that someone was being assaulted by a strong man on the side of the road ahead. A burly man was pressing a woman underneath him, emitting a lewd laugh as he tore the woman's clothes. A large expanse of snow-white skin was exposed, causing the woman to scream and shout in distress, which only further fueled the man's savagery. Big Brotherswa, Lu Ji, who was driving the carriage, couldn't bear to watch. Due to his naturally kind personality, coupled with the light spirit religion's teachings to help the weak, he couldn't just ignore such a wicked act. However, Zhou Wu Yu's face flashed a look of vigilance as he said in a low tone, "Carry on." Upon hearing the command, Lu Ji gritted his teeth and quickly drove the carriage past them. Under normal circumstances, the two of them would not sit idly by in the face of such an incident. But now there was only one priority, which was to escort the Holy Sun to Dawn City. Everything else was unimportant. When the carriage approached, the burly man had already stopped his actions and looked warily at Lu Ji. It was only after the carriage passed that he breathed a sigh of relief. The woman who was pinned down by him screamed, "Help! Help me!" Aggravated, the burly man slapped her and sneered, "No one will come to save you. Give up." But just as he finished speaking, his body suddenly shook, and he looked down to see a spear piercing through his chest. The burly man's eyes widened as his strength quickly ebbed away. Yang Kai flicked his spear and tossed the burly man to the side. He then smiled and reached out to the beautiful but pale-faced woman. "Miss, you're safe now." The woman clearly hadn't fully realized what had happened until she saw the corpse of the burly man next to her, which caused her to completely break down and throw herself into Yang Kai's arms, crying bitterly. A little while later, Yang Kai sat in the carriage, holding a warm and soft woman in his arms. She seemed to be so frightened that she held onto his neck with all her might, like an octopus clinging to him. On the other hand, Zhou Yu didn't know where to look, mainly because the woman's clothes were torn and her snow-white skin was a little too dazzling. Zhou Yu didn't know what to say. He never expected that the Holy Sun would suddenly jump off the carriage and play the hero to save the damsel in distress. But he had to admit that the woman was quite attractive. Even with her hair disheveled and her face covered in dirt, it couldn't conceal her charm. On the contrary, it accentuated her pitiful appearance, causing people to sympathize with her at a glance. Such looks easily attracted unwanted attention in these troubled times. With outsiders present, Zhou Wu couldn't address Yang Kai as Holy Sun, so he simply referred to him as Sir. Yang Kai chuckled. "It's our duty to lend a helping hand when we see injustice. If we ignore something that we can easily help with just because it is inconvenient, then why bother cultivating it all? Besides, this carriage has plenty of space. Having one more person won't make a difference." Zhou Wu could only nod and say, "As Sir says, Yang Kai ignored Zhuo Wuyu and instead lowered his head to look at the woman in his arms, speaking in a gentle and soothing voice. "Little beauty, what's your name? Where are you from? Are you married?" Zhuo Wuyu couldn't help but feel speechless at what he was witnessing. He never imagined that the Holy Sun had such an interest in beauties. Of course, it was natural for men to appreciate beautiful women, but there was a time and place for everything. Originally, Zhuo Wuyu admired the Holy Sun's ability to dispatch Yan Peng and his dozens of followers with a single sword, and he believed that the spirit religion had a bright future. But now, those expectations had taken a hit. Could such a Holy Sun really achieve great things? Zhuo Wuyu couldn't help but worry about the future of the spirit religion. As the woman in Yang Kai's arms slowly calmed down and seemed to realize that their position was not appropriate, she blushed, burying her head in Yang Kai's chest instead of answering his questions. Yang Kai laughed heartily at her response, feeling quite pleased with himself. However, the woman suddenly raised her head and looked at him with a bewildered expression. Yang Kai hugged her tightly and looked down at her. "What's wrong? Why did you try and kill me?" The woman's coquettishness and shyness disappeared out of nowhere, replaced by an expression of disbelief. You're not dead?" The woman cursed loudly. "Are you even human?" Their conversation made no sense, leaving not only the driver Lu Ji puzzled, but also Zhuo Wuyu, who was in the same carriage. However, the odd atmosphere made him feel a great sense of danger, and he quickly tightened his grip on his long sword, only to find that it was gone. Zhuo Wuyu was shocked. He didn't even know when he had lost his sword. Next, the carriage became filled with a strong, metallic smell. The woman in Yang Kai's arms started bleeding fresh blood. Whereas Zhuo Wuyu's lost sword was pierced through her, the hilt gripped in Yang Kai's hand. With a loud bang, violent waves of energy swept through the carriage, lifting the roof off. The woman, who had been in Yang Kai's embrace, suddenly turned into a blood mist, breaking free from his grasp. The sudden turn of events frightened the horses pulling the carriage, resulting in them neighing in panic. Lu Ji had to quickly calm them down, or they would have bolted. Zhuo Wuyu was also thrown off balance by the shockwave, almost being blown away, but luckily was grabbed by Yang Kai just in time. The carriage continued forward, and in the shabby compartment, Yang Kai and Zhuo Wuyu looked behind together. In the half-empty air, a twisting, writhing mass of blood gradually transformed into the alluring figure of a red-robed woman. She clutched her chest, her face twisted with hatred and resentment, her beautiful eyes fixated on Yang Kai, overflowing with intense malice, as if she wished to devour his flesh and drink his blood right then. Knight Chapter Master Xueji, Zhuo Wuyu was shocked and terrified. Though they knew that the Black Ink cult would soon have pursuers on their heels, he never expected it to be her. They were in trouble now. Yang Kai's brow raised slightly as he thought to himself, "As I suspected." Thanks to the information he had gleaned from Yan Peng, Yang Kai was no longer completely ignorant about the primordial world. The Black Ink cult, under the command of M.O., was divided into the 8 chapters, each with their own structure and hierarchy. The Knight chapter, though the smallest in number, was made up entirely of elite assassins. Everyone in the Knight chapter of the Black Ink cult was a master of their craft, especially Knight Chapter Master Xueji, who was said to possess the ability to transform into thousands of different forms, making her an almost invincible opponent. Throughout the history of the light spirit religion, countless high-ranking members had died under the Knight chapter's assassinations, including several Sanuses. Among the Black Ink cult's 8 chapters, the light spirit religion was most wary of the Knight chapter, as nobody knew where they hid or when they would strike a deadly blow. Zhuo Wuyu shivered at the thought of facing the Knight chapter master himself, realizing that he and his companions were in grave danger. But this only made him admire the Holy Sun even more. Though he had been cautious before, so Wu Yu had failed to notice any flaws. Little did he know, the seemingly lustful and carefree Holy Sun was already aware and prepared to strike, displaying a level of cunning and decisiveness that left others in awe. You shouldn't be alive. Yang Kai looked at Xueji in confusion. He could sense that Xueji was an immortal ascension boundary master, but even so, there was no way she should have survived being stabbed through the heart with his sword. However, she only seemed to have suffered some damage to her foundation, with no threat to her life. All his actions really accomplished was making her angry. Her mastery over blood was unlike any he had seen before. "How dare you wound me? I'll devour." Xueji's face twisted with rage, but before she could finish her sentence, another figure appeared before her. It was none other than Yang Kai, who should have been standing in the carriage. He wielded a long spear without hesitation and used his formidable, supreme, limitless secret art on Xueji. His spear strikes rained down on her without mercy, creating countless holes in her body. Wu Yu wasted no time too and joined the attack, brandishing his sword with skill and unleashing a flurry of strikes upon Xueji. With their combined efforts, Xueji was quickly reduced to a mist of blood, vanishing from sight in an instant. Martial Peak. Martial Peak, Chapter 5935. The Earth chapter appears. Martial Peak, as the bloody mist condensed and converged, it surged towards the two of them. Yang Kai's face changed slightly as he grabbed Wu Yu and jumped back onto the carriage. In the sky, the blood mist seemed to possess a sense of spirituality, quickly fleeing into the distance as Xueji's voice echoed. "I will rip your corpse into 10,000 sooner or later." The infamous Night Chapter Master escaped in such a pathetic state just like that. Watching her depart, Yang Kai wore a troubled expression as he muttered, "So difficult to deal with. Ordinary people would have died from such a surprise attack or from the follow-up assault, but Xueji was able to keep her life intact. Her skills were truly remarkable, making Yang Kai feel a sense of admiration for her talent. Through their brief exchange just now, Yang Kai noticed something. Xueji's mastery over the blood Dao was indeed extremely high, leaving her with no fatal weakness. Even if her heart was pierced through, she would still be alive, only suffering some damage to her foundation. But since she was severely injured just now, it would surely cause serious damage to her foundation, and she probably would not dare to come again in a short time. No wonder so many experts from the spirit religion can't deal with her. It turns out that her methods are so insidious. So Wu Yu's face was filled with fear as he recalled what happened earlier. If the Holy Sun hadn't noticed anything, they might have already died, without even realizing how. Turning to look at Yang Kai, so Wu Yu became even more respectful of this Holy Sun. On the other hand, Lu Ji was still driving the carriage without its roof while desperately fleeing forward, leaving a trail of dust in their wake. "I'm afraid this journey won't be peaceful," Yang Kai muttered casually. So Wu Yu replied, "Rest assured, Holy Sun, I have already sent out a coded message. The spirit religion will soon send experts to assist us." "That's good," Yang Kai nodded. So Wu Yu was also a thorough person, and it seemed that he had made arrangements when they picked up the carriage at that small town earlier. Suddenly, a piercing scream sounded, and the horses pulling the carriage fell down. The carriage, hurtling forward at full speed, crashed into the horses and flew into the air. As soon as they sensed that something was wrong, Yang Kai, Zhu Wu Yu, and Lu Ji jumped off the carriage. The three of them stood in midair and looked closely. The horses were surrounded by a red light, and in a mournful fit, they turned into a pool of blood, leaving only white skeletons behind. Zhu Wu Yu paled slightly as he had no idea at all when Xueji attacked the horse. Even Yang Kai had not noticed it this time. Looking back now, it was likely that it happened when Shueji was stabbed by himself and turned into a blood mist while breaking free from him. Big Brother Swa. Lu Ji suddenly panicked. Yong Kai and Swa Wu Yu turned their heads to look, and the both of them paled in shock upon the sight. Lu Ji was now emitting a bloody red light, and within that light, his power became chaotic to the extreme, his physique melting away like a candle in high heat. Lu Ji, Swa Wu Yu cried out. Lu Ji clearly knew what was about to happen too, so after a brief moment of panic, his expression suddenly became resolute as he shouted, "Brother Swa, you must send Holy Sun back." As soon as he finished the sentence, he flew away, with pieces of his body dissolving into blood, leaving behind only scattered bones that fell from the sky in a matter of moments. Staring blankly at the scene, Swa Wu Yu went silent for a long time, his anger and grief beyond words. Yong Kai's expression turned grave too. Shueji's methods were truly insidious and unpredictable. When he noticed something wrong with Lu Ji earlier, he had wanted to help, but it was already too late. In just a few breaths, Lu Ji had been killed. He turned his head to look at Swa Wu Yu, confirming that he was unharmed, and that he himself had not fallen prey to Shueji's attack, without him realizing. If he had, it would have been impossible to remain oblivious. It seemed that Shueji did not intend to kill him. Otherwise, she would have used such means from the start. Finally, Swa Wu Yu regained his composure, despite his red eyes and throbbing veins on his forehead. He longed to fight Shueji, but his priority was to escort the Holy Sun back to Dawn City. "Holy Sun, let's go," Swa Wu Yu called out, leading the way. Since the carriage was gone, the two of them could only fly. However, not having a means of transportation was inconvenient, especially since Swa Wu Yu was still injured and had to push himself to keep going. When night fell, they found a place to rest in the wilderness. Swa Wu Yu meditated and adjusted his breathing while Yong Kai stood guard beside him. The cold moonlight poured down, and Yong Kai looked up at the full moon with many thoughts flooding his mind. From the information he had gathered, he determined that the primitive world was a real world where all living beings, including the 3 members of the Light Spirit religion and the Black Ink cult members they encountered, were truly alive. This was quite different from what Yong Kai had originally thought. He initially believed that everything here was an illusion in Mu's space-time river, but it seemed that he had greatly underestimated her. The Black Ink cult and Light Spirit religion were opposed to each other. The Black Ink cult members could use Black Ink strength, while the first saintess of Light Spirit religion left a prophecy. Everything was still vague and unclear, so Yong Kai could not fathom what the hidden hand Mu left in this world was. It would only be after he greeted the saintess that he would be able to know everything. The journey ahead was slow, difficult, and obstructed. Under the moonlight, Yong Kai saw a shadow twist and writhe slightly. Flicking his wrist, Yong Kai sent out a crescent-shaped black strike, hitting the shadow. Then, blood started flowing from the shadow, filling the air with a metallic tinge. Despite being suppressed by this independent world, his foundation was still intact, and he could still invoke some of his space secret techniques. Moreover, Yong Kai could sense that the suppression of his strength in this world was not absolute. His strength could still be improved, and given time, he could at least restore his cultivation to the immortal ascension boundary. However, this was probably the limit that this world could accommodate. Although Yong Kai could only increase his cultivation by a major realm, the power he could exert by then would increase by a lot. As dawn broke over the horizon, Swa Wu Yu finally awoke from his meditative state, having spent the night adjusting his breathing and restoring his energy. But what he saw upon opening his eyes left him startled. A field of corpses strewn haphazardly across the ground, their blood painting the earth a deep shade of red. These bodies showed no signs of resistance, having been cleanly sliced in two by some incredibly sharp weapon. So you couldn't even begin to guess when these people had come or how they died. But one thing was clear. They were all assassins from the Black Ink Cult's night chapter. Feeling ashamed, he rose to his feet and addressed his companion. Holy Son, Yong Kai merely glanced at him and nodded in response. Prepare for a breakout. Oh. Wu Yu was taken aback by this sudden directive, but he soon understood what Yong Kai meant, though he was only in the true element boundary and lacked a divine sense. His regular senses were sharp enough to detect the danger around them. This realization left him pale, but Yong Kai remained unperturbed, dusting himself off and pointing in the direction they had been traveling. Yesterday, we were heading towards Dawn City in that direction, right? Yes. Wu nodded. Then, let's go, Yong Kai declared, lifting his long spear. We're just going off like this. Wu Yu was taken aback. Once again, the Black Ink Cult surely knew that they were heading towards Dawn City, and the interception in this direction would definitely be the strongest. The safest course of action would be to test the enemy's strength and choose a weaker defensive position to break through. But Yong Kai replied confidently, we're going to Dawn City, and it's closest in this direction. We'll go this way. Saying so, he strode forward, so Wu Yu had no choice but to follow. Suddenly, a loud clanging sound echoed in all directions as a barrage of arrows flew towards them. Wu Yu quickly raised his sword to deflect them, all the while shouting a warning to Yong Kai, Holy Son, be careful. But when he turned his head, he only saw Yong Kai strolling leisurely through the rain of arrows with no effort to dodge or resist them, yet the dense barrage of arrows couldn't even touch his clothes. How is that possible? Wu Yu couldn't wrap his head around it. Before he could fully comprehend what was happening, he witnessed Yong Kai flicking his fingers and launching a barrage of black moon blades in all directions. These blades seemed to cut through space itself, effortlessly breaking through the blockade. In the next instant, screams echoed throughout the area. Wu Yu couldn't help but remember the gruesome scene of the corpses from before, realizing how Yong Kai had managed to defeat the enemies last night. The two figures continued to fly forward, killing their opponents without mercy. It was only a moment later when the rain of arrows from the shadows became sparse, eventually stopping completely. Perhaps the enemy had realized that this tactic was futile against Yong Kai, though the temporary pause didn't mean they had given up their siege, but rather prepared for an even stronger attack. After flying forward for a while longer, several figures suddenly flew towards them from the front. Each of these people was a peak true element boundary master, radiating a strong aura. They also seemed to maintain a unique battle formation as they moved forward. They all carried long swords, exuding a chilling sword intent. Wu Yu's expression turned grave. They're from the Earth chapter of the Black Ink Cult. They usually handle small-scale battles. I didn't expect them to show up this time. What worried Wu Yu more was the possibility that the Earth chapter master might also be among them. If that were the case, it would be a bigger problem. That person wasn't as sneaky as Xueji, and although he had an impulsive character, his strength was second to none among the 8 chapter masters of the Black Ink Cult. Be careful. Holy Son. They have the North Star Sword formation, which can combine the strength of 7 people to unleash a power far beyond their individual cultivation realm. So Wu Yu warned. As soon as he finished speaking, the enemy had already made their move. Their battle formation was impressive, converging the strength of 7 people into one. The leader of the group waved their long sword, and a massive sword wave came crashing down on Yong Kai, instantly splitting him in half. So Wu Yu's previous boiling blood ran cold all of a sudden. Martial Peak. Martial Peak, Chapter 59-36. What kind of monster are you, Martial Peak? The 7 swordsmen in the formation had no idea their target would be so weak, easily slain with just one sword strike. However, the severed body that lay before them didn't spill fresh blood, and instead quickly faded into nothingness. It was merely an afterimage. The 7 of them were shocked, and were about to launch another sword attack when they heard a voice in their ears. A good sword, but it still lacks a certain substance. In the next instant, a single spear shadow filled their vision before blood burst forth. The sword formation was instantly broken, and the 7 swordsmen who comprised it either died or became seriously wounded. Suo Wuyu flew over, using his secret techniques to kill any survivors. He then turned to Yang Kai. Holy Sun. He was filled with disbelief. For a moment, he thought the Holy Sun had been killed, but it turned out to be just an afterimage. He hadn't even seen how the Holy Sun moved, which meant his movement skill was beyond his comprehension. Quick, let's go, Suo Wuyu said in a low voice. He had a sense of unease in his heart, as if a great danger was approaching. Before he could do anything, though, a strange voice sounded. Do you think you can kill so many of us and just walk away? He's here. Suo Wuyu's face changed drastically, apparently realizing what was happening. Yang Kai's expression also became serious as he sensed a powerful aura rapidly approaching them. He looked in that direction and saw a figure quickly running towards them like lightning. He immediately pushed Suo Wuyu aside and lifted his spear and thrust it out. The figure quickly approached, revealing a towering man with a fierce and evil expression, giving off a genuine immortal ascension boundary aura. Not only was this man a master from the Black Ink Cult's Earth chapter, but he was also one of the strongest among the 8 chapter masters. Facing Yang Kai's spear strike, he didn't dodge or evade. Instead, he smirked and met the strike with a punch. The long spear shattered as the punch's force swept forward, causing Yang Kai to grunt and retreat a dozen steps before stabilizing his footing. Suddenly, his clothes burst apart at the back, pierced by the force of the punch. The long spear was now turned to dust because it was only a common item that couldn't withstand a full-force attack from an Immortal Ascension Realm Master. Oh. The Earth Chapter Master threw only one punch and didn't pursue further, looking surprised when he saw Yang Kai's state. You're not dead yet. He could sense that the young man before him was only in the true element boundary, yet he could withstand his punch without dying, which was quite strange. Forget it. It's your misfortune that I didn't kill you with one punch. The next one will do the job. Saying so, the Earth Chapter Master strode towards Yang Kai till he was close enough, and then he struck again. With a loud boom, a violent shockwave swept out as the ground cracked open. The Earth Chapter Master's eyes narrowed with amazement, for his surefire punch had been blocked by the other party's fist. To the side, Suo Wuyu had just regained his footing and witnessed a scene he would never forget. He saw the Holy Sun slightly hunched over, raising his fist to meet the Earth Chapter Master's punch. Under the intense collision, the scene froze. Looking up at the Earth Chapter Master, Yang Kai snickered. With such a soft punch, who are you trying to kill? Both Suo Wuyu and Earth Chapter Master were taken aback. Of the 8 chapter masters of the Black Ink Cult, each of them had their own unique skills, except for the Earth Chapter Master, who wasn't specialized in secret techniques or used any kind of weapon. Despite having no defining trait, the Earth Chapter Master was still ranked among the top 3 strongest chapter masters for his physical strength alone, having refined his body to the point of being as strong as an artifact, with fists that could destroy anything in the world. In terms of physical strength and power alone, the Earth Chapter Master was undoubtedly the best in the entire primordial world. Even masters in the same realm as him couldn't withstand his punches. Once, a master of the spirit religion who was also in the Immortal Ascension boundary fought him in close combat relying on a protective artifact, but he was killed with a single punch, and even the protective artifact was shattered by that punch. Suo Wuyu could not conceive of anyone who could directly withstand such a terrifying master, and his fists alone. Not until he witnessed this scene with his own eyes. Despite the Holy Sun's physique not being as robust as the Earth Chapter Master's, with his build being at best half as bulky, the difference between them only highlighted the incredible nature of this frozen moment. The Earth Chapter Master was clearly angered by Yang Kai's words and let out a low growl. "I haven't seen such a bold person in a long time. I hope your fists will be as strong as your mouth." He swung his fist and attacked again. Yang Kai faced the incoming fist with casual indifference and replied, "I was just about to say the same thing." Hong hong hong, the violent impact of their fists created deafening noise, and the visible shockwaves rippled outwards from where their fists met. The disdain on Earth Chapter Master's face gradually dissipated, replaced by a look of seriousness and confusion. He couldn't fathom how such a frail body could contain such immense power. He even had a vague suspicion that Yang Kai wasn't even using his full strength yet. This thought frightened him, which he dared not dwell on any further. As for Yang Kai, he was also equally frustrated. The suppression from this independent world was too great. Not only had his strength fallen from the Ninth Order open heaven realm to the true element boundary, but even his dragon vein couldn't be fully accessed. To paint a clearer picture, if the power from his dragon vein were to be described as a lake, the amount of power he could currently access would only be equivalent to a mere drop of water. If not for this, he could easily crush an immortal Ascension Master with just one finger. At present, his strength was slightly greater than Earth Chapter Master's, but not by much. Their fists collided again and again, gradually covering them in bloody wounds with fresh blood splattering every time they clashed. Suddenly, Yang Kai taunted the Earth Chapter Master by tilting his chin up. "You and your black ink cult's endless pursuit. I wonder, if I kill you, will the rest of our path become peaceful?" The Earth Chapter Master felt insulted and roared, "If you can kill me, then you'll get what you want." His expression then turned ferocious. "But are you capable?" As he spoke, a pitch-black mist enveloped him, and his body swelled up, his muscles bulging as an even greater power erupted from within. Following this, he unleashed a punch that was far more powerful than his previous ones. This punch was almost equal to Yang Kai's current limit. However, facing this attack, Yang Kai remained calm as he used his fist to meet the punch head-on. A loud explosion resounded. Yang Kai's body shook slightly, while the Earth Chapter Master stumbled. His previously determined expression became uncertain. Without giving him a chance to catch his breath, Yang Kai's attack suddenly became even more intense. The Earth Chapter Master also roared continuously, shifting from offense to defense as he tried to fend off Yang Kai's relentless assault. After a moment, his eyes trembled violently as he shouted, "What kind of monster are you?" He had always been the one to overwhelm others with his physique and strength, dominating the entire primordial world without anyone in this domain surpassing him. Yet today, even with the help of his black ink strength, he found himself falling behind. It was simply unbearable. What made it worse was the strange power of his opponent's punches, each strike penetrating through his physical defense and hammering his body from the inside out, causing damage to his 5 viscera and 6 organs. Amidst his roar of anger, a sharp divine sense suddenly erupted towards Yang Kai's mind, followed by the voice of a woman saying, "I told you this guy was not easy to deal with, but you had to be careless. Now you're in trouble." Xueji. She had also arrived, and she had been concealing herself nearby. A crimson blood mist suddenly manifested and rushed straight at Yang Kai, wrapping him up completely. Xueji's insidious voice rang out from within the blood mist, "Bastard! It's your honor to die under the combined efforts of us 2 mighty chapter masters. Now, offer up your physical essence. With a vigorous man like you, the taste would certainly be heavenly." As she spoke, fresh blood gushed out of the wounds on Yang Kai's fists, seemingly drawn out by some unknown force, and merged into the blood mist. When Yang Kai saw this, He just smirked mockingly and said, "You want to eat me? Be careful not to burst your stomach." A faint dragon roar was then heard. The blood mist surrounding Yang Kai writhed and twisted as if struck by lightning. "What is this?" Shueji's voice became frantic, as she seemed to encounter something she couldn't understand. During her speech, Shueji screamed again and hurriedly withdrew from Yang Kai's body, transforming back into her own body in midair. However, it was difficult for her to maintain her body's stability, like a storm was rampaging inside her, causing her flesh to suddenly expand like a ball and then twist like a rope. Shueji let out a mournful cry, her entire body bursting into a ball of blood mist. Even though Yang Kai's dragon vein had been suppressed, it was still fundamentally powered by a divine dragon. Shueji, unaware of the truth, had swallowed and tried to refine the blood of the divine dragon. Even if it was just a tiny drop, it was not something that a cultivator of her caliber could endure. The burst blood mist once again gathered into Shueji's figure, only to burst again in her agonizing screams. This endless cycle of torment seemed as if it would carry on forever. On the other hand, the Earth Chapter Master, who was fighting Yang Kai, couldn't help but shudder with fear. Yang Kai was already beyond him in terms of physicality and strength, a fact that he struggled to accept. But now, Shueji's mere act of devouring a bit of his blood had left her in such agony that he couldn't fathom what trick Yang Kai had played on her. At that moment, he finally understood the fear and unease that his enemies must have felt before they died at his hand. And to make matters worse, the holy son of the light spirit religion before him seemed to be immune to spiritual energy attacks. Moments ago, Shueji had used her divine sense to strike him, yet her opponent seemed completely unfazed, as if nothing had happened. He wasn't even wearing any soul-type artifacts, so how could he withstand soul attacks? Kacha with a loud cracking sound. The Earth Chapter Master was horrified to discover that his arm had been broken. After exchanging so many punches, it seemed his physical body had exceeded its limits. Yang Kai landed another blow and mocked, "So much for your strength." The Earth Chapter Master desperately blocked the incoming punch and retreated backwards, but quickly changed direction and fled as fast as he could. Along the way, he took several more punches from Yang Kai, spewing fresh blood from his mouth and looking pathetic. Martial Peak. Martial Peak, Chapter 5937, Spirit Religion's Reinforcements. Martial Peak Yang Kai dashed forward relentlessly, determined to capture the Earth Chapter Master. However, he was intercepted by a group of Black Ink cult members midway, forcing him to deal with them first. And by the time he was done, the Earth Chapter Master had already vanished into thin air, leaving him with no choice but to backtrack. So Wu Yu was still there, having fought against some Earth Chapter members during Yang Kai's battle with the Earth Chapter Master. He now appeared worn out, his body slumped against a pile of rubble, his breath ragged, and his body covered in blood. "Where's Shueji?" Yang Kai glanced around, but saw no trace of the seductive woman. "She escaped when you went after the Earth Chapter Master," so Wu Yu replied. Yang Kai pondered for a moment and said, "Never mind, she won't live much longer anyway." To think that the Night Chapter Master dared to covet a divine dragon's blood, she was bound to die by her own hand. So Yang Kai had no interest in tracking her down either. "Can you still move?" Yang Kai asked Wu Yu, so Wu Yu replied, "Please, Holy Sun, go ahead first." Then he pointed in a certain direction and continued, "When you see a large city with tall walls, that would be Dawn City." Although Yang Kai had demonstrated formidable sword secret techniques and great physical strength, he was still true element boundary. So Wu Yu had not expected him to turn the tables against the joint attack of two of the Black Ink cult's top combatants. It was a victory across realms, a miracle that had never been achieved before. With a holy son of such strength, it was best for him to travel to Dawn City alone, as Swo Wu Yu didn't want to be a burden to him. Yang Kai understood his intention with just a moment's thought. He walked over to help Swo Wu Yu up and said, "My sense of direction has always been poor. I will need your guidance along the way." Swo Wu Yu was about to say something more when Yang Kai interrupted. "The Night Chapter and Earth Chapter have failed consecutively. The Black Ink cult won't be able to spare any more forces to pursue us in the short term. Therefore, the road ahead should not be too dangerous." So Wu Yu thought for a moment before feeling it was reasonable. Although the Black Ink cult was a mighty army with the finest weapons and the 8 chapters' heritage was magnificent, the sudden emergence of a holy son, who was not previously known, made it difficult for Black Ink cult to prepare appropriately. The fact that they could mobilize so many Night Chapter and Earth Chapter cultists, even having the personal presence of the 2 chapter masters, was already the limit of what Black Ink cult could do in the short term. Now that the 2 chapter masters had been defeated and many of their troops were either killed or injured, they were unlikely to have the strength to cause any more trouble. Finally gaining a sense of relief, Swo Wu Yu said, "Then I will travel with you, Holy Son." "Good." Yang Kai nodded and enveloped him with his power before flying off. In the depths of a damp and dark underground cavern, within a natural cave, the sound of agonizing screams echoed through a cluster of crimson mist, as if someone was enduring unbearable torture. The mist contorted and expanded randomly, desperately trying to take on a humanoid shape, but each time it did, it would explode uncontrollably, the screams growing louder with each cycle. This scene repeated itself again and again, the mist becoming thinner and the screams gradually becoming less audible. Finally, at a certain moment, the thinning mist condensed once more into a graceful figure who curled up on the damp ground like a wounded rabbit. Her fair body was covered in dried-up blood, motionless, like she was devoid of vitality. However, after a while, the owner of that body suddenly took in a deep breath as if her soul had returned. When she opened her eyes, they were filled with a look of horror. Such power, she whispered softly, almost inaudible. Madness then overtook her as she murmured it several times, her voice gradually becoming more resounding. "Brings me such joy." Trembling with excitement, her eyes became filled with anticipation and glee. She forced herself to stand up despite her weakened body and retrieved a blood-red robe from her space ring. After putting it on and restoring herself for a moment, she turned into a bloody mist and vanished into the dark underground. Moments later, she reappeared on the previous battlefield, searching earnestly among the pieces of broken limbs and flesh. Finally, she made a discovery which caused her to turn ecstatic. Then, she activated her blood secret technique, sending a burst of scarlet mist deep into the ground. Later, when she retrieved it again, the mist glimmered with a golden light. She merged it into her body and immediately felt the terrifying power expanding within her body, causing her expression to contort and a mournful cry to erupt, frightening countless beasts and birds in the nearby wilderness. "So Wu Yu, is this the Holy Son you spoke of?" Outside a small town, a group of people blocked the way of Yang Kai and Swo Wu Yu. The leader, an immortal ascension boundary master, looked at Yang Kai from top to bottom and asked. Swo Wu Yu cupped his fists, replying, "Senior Chu, when the Holy Son descended, he fulfilled the prophecy passed down by the spirit religion. There is no mistake." The cultivator surnamed Chu nodded. "The spirit religion's prophecy has been circulating for countless years. In the past, there have been several instances of suspected holy sons, but they were all proven to be misunderstandings or the schemes of people with ulterior motives." So Wu Yu was suddenly confused by his words as he asked, "Sir, There have been several holy sons in the past. Though he possessed quite a high status in the spirit religion, he was only in the true element boundary, so he wasn't qualified enough to know about some top secrets. The master surnamed Chu nodded. As I said, the prophecy of the spirit religion has been passed down for countless years, and the Black Ink cult is also aware of it. They had previously attempted to use this method to infiltrate us. Upon hearing that, Wu Yu became anxious. Sir, this holy son is definitely not a member of the Black Ink cult. He had seen how the holy son had fought with the Black Ink cult's 2 chapter masters, and how he had killed those Black Ink cultists along the way. How could such a person be a spy sent by the Black Ink cult? The master surnamed Chu raised his hand to stop him. Your loyalty to the spirit religion is clear to me, but the matter of the holy son still needs to be decided by the many order lords. We only need to do our part, understand? So Wu Yu pursed his lips. I understand. The immortal ascension boundary cultivator finally looked at Yang Kai and introduced himself. Old Master Chu and he. How should we address this young friend? Yang Kai smiled and bowed respectfully. Yang Kai, he couldn't help but find the old man interesting. By saying all of those to Wu Yu in front of him, Chu and he was clearly warning Yang Kai, but he understood that it was a necessary action, so he held no grudges. Besides, Yang Kai was never really concerned about his status as the Holy Son. It was only Wu Yu and his comrades who persistently addressed him as so throughout their journey. All he wanted was to go to Dawn City and meet the saintess of the light spirit religion to verify his suspicions. Only one thing puzzled him. After his identity as the Holy Son was exposed, the Black Ink cult swiftly organized 3 high-level attacks, but there had been no response from the light spirit religion. So Wu Yu had sent a message ahead when they were getting the carriage at a small town a while back. So logically, whether or not his identity as the Holy Son was real, the light spirit religion should have given him enough attention and quickly arranged for people to assist them. But in fact, it had already been 4 days since Yang Kai and Wu Yu began their trek. After another 1 or 2 days, the two would have arrived at Dawn City on their own. It wasn't until now that the light spirit religion finally dispatched a group of people to meet them. In terms of efficiency, the light spirit religion was far worse than the Black Ink cult. Their attitude towards Yang Kai as the Holy Son were also completely different. I shall address you as such, then. Chu and he showed a warm smile. After Wu Yu's message was received, the spirit religion made the corresponding arrangements and deployment. There are enough people ahead to receive you. Follow me. The saintess and the order lords are already waiting in the holy city. The Black Ink cult had 8 chapters: the heaven, earth profound, dawn, night, space, flood, and barren chapters. Likewise, the light spirit religion also had 8 orders: heaven, earth, thunder, wind, fire, water, mountain, and lake valley orders. The 8 chapter masters and 8 order lords were the most powerful masters in the world. Good. Yang Kai nodded. Follow me this way. Chu and he beckoned, walking with Yang Kai towards the small town ahead. You must have encountered many hardships on your way here, little friend, Chu and he said with a smile, seeing how dusty and tired you look. You must have been attacked by the Black Ink cult. Yang Kai replied with a smile. But it was just a bunch of small fry that Brother Zhua and I easily took care of. Behind them, Wu Yu couldn't help but glance at Yang Kai with a hint of surprise in his eyes. So that's how it is. Chu and he also smiled. The Black Ink cult has always been vile and treacherous. If you encounter them again in the future, don't underestimate them. Of course, Yang Kai replied casually as they walked and chatted. The group soon entered the small town, and Yang Kai looked around and asked in curiosity, "Why is this place so desolate? I don't see anyone around." "It's a matter about the Holy Son. Well, though it hasn't been confirmed, it's better to be cautious. So, before your arrival, This old master cleared out all the people in the town, lest they give black ink cultists an opportunity. Yang Kai praised. Sir Chu's actions are quite thorough. Saying so, he suddenly stopped and turned around, reaching out to grab Swo Wu Yu's shoulder while smiling. Brother Swo, you must learn from Sir Chu. Swo Wu Yu was in a daze at the sudden instruction. Though he felt something was off during their journey, he couldn't quite put his finger on it. When Yang Kai pulled him over, he instinctively nodded and said, as the Holy Sun instructs. Chu and he, on the other hand, stroked his beard and smiled without saying a word. The group passed a corner of the small town. Suddenly, Swo Wu Yu froze in place and looked around. Senior Chu? Yang Kai stood beside him with a smile. Be careful. Holy Sun. Swo Wu Yu was suddenly as nervous as a startled rabbit, pulling out his sword to guard Yang Kai in front of him. Because at the moment they turned the corner, Chu and he and the others who had been traveling with them disappeared without a trace, leaving only the two of them. There were obvious traces of a spirit array being activated all around them. In other words, they had fallen into a trap. No one knew when it was set up or what kind of mystery it held, but entering such an array recklessly would surely bring about great danger. Marshall Peak. Marshall Peak, Chapter 59:38. A Trap. Marshall Peak. Yang Kai suddenly spoke up. Brother Zwa, does your spirit religion often root out lurking members of the Black Ink cult? What? Swo Wu Yu instinctively responded, but quickly realized. Holy Sun, you mean? Before he could finish his sentence, Chu and his voice sounded in their ears, hidden by the spirit array. No one knew where he was, but his previous gentle and warm demeanor was now replaced by brutality and ferocity. Swo Wu Yu, after all these years of nurture and trust from spirit religion, you dare to collude with the Black Ink cult and bring disaster to the foundation of our spirit religion? Do you know your crime? Swo Wu Yu shouted in response. Senior Chu, I was born and raised in the spirit religion. The spirit religion has given me everything I have, and without its protection over the years, how could I have achieved my current glory? I am loyal to the spirit religion with all my heart and soul. Sir, how can you accuse me of colluding with the Black Ink cult? Chu, and he coldly snorted, you still dare to argue? That person by your side, isn't he a member of the Black Ink cult? Swo Wu Yu frowned and quickly retorted, Senior Chu, are you referring to the Holy Sun? Tisk. Chu, and he burst out, he is a spy of the Black Ink cult. How dare you call him Holy Sun? Swo Wu Yu immediately changed the way he addressed Yang Kai. Brother Yang and I have been traveling together, killing many members of the Black Ink cult. We even defeated the Night Chapter Master and injured the Earth Chapter Master. Without Brother Yang's protection, I would have been a dead man long ago. Brother Yang cannot possibly be a member of the Black Ink cult. Chu, when he became silent for a moment before he slowly spoke, you said he defeated the Night Chapter Master and injured the Earth Chapter Master? Yes, I saw it with my own eyes, replied Swo Wu Yu. Ha ha ha. Chu, and he burst into laughter. Why are you laughing, Senior Chu? Swo Wu Yu asked in a deep voice. Chu, and he roared, you fools. This person by your side is only a trivial true element cultivator, while the Night Chapter Master and Earth Chapter Master are both masters renowned throughout the world. Even this king at the immortal ascension boundary can only admit defeat before them, so how could he possibly defeat them? Swo Wu Yu, how can you not see through such a simple trick? Swo Wu Yu suddenly became suspicious and couldn't help but turn his head to glance at Yang Kai. Swo Wu Yu was in a daze, reminiscing on the events that had transpired. He was once amazed by Yang Kai's impressive strength, being able to fight beyond his realm and even take down 2 chapter masters of the Black Ink cult. But what if all of this was just a part of the enemy's plan to gain his trust? As he thought back on it now, the timing and location of the appearance of the supposed Holy Sun seemed questionable. He was now momentarily lost in thought. Yang Kai simply smiled faintly in response to his gaze and said, "Old sir, to be honest, I'm not very interested in being your holy son. Brothers seems to have misunderstood something all this time, hence calling me by that title. Whether or not you call me, that doesn't really matter. The reason why I have come this far is simply to meet your saintess. Could you facilitate that for me, old sir?" Chuani coldly snorted, "Even at death's door, you dare to speak such honeyed words? The saintess is a noble figure, not someone a black ink cult spy can simply meet." Upon hearing that, Yang Kai became displeased. "You keep calling me a black ink cult spy, but how can you be so sure that I am one?" After a moment of silence, Chuan finally spoke. "It doesn't matter now that things have come to this. I'll tell you the truth. Spirit religion's true holy son was found 10 years ago. If you're not part of the black ink cult, why pretend to be the holy son?" "What?" So Wu Yu was shocked at the news. This was originally top secret, only known by the saintess, the 8 order lords, and a few select others. But the spirit religion has already decided to have the holy sun appear to stabilize the people's hearts, so it's no longer a secret. So Wu Yu stood rooted to the spot, the impact of this news weighing heavily on him. So the holy son of the spirit religion was already found 10 years ago. If that were the case, who was this person standing beside him? When he appeared, he did fit the prophecy left behind by the first-generation saintess. It was no wonder why the spirit religion had not sent anyone to assist him on his journey. While the black ink cult had already dispatched 2 chapter masters, the spirit religion had been slow to react, sending only a single elder in the end. At that moment, Zhuo Wuyu understood many things. It wasn't that the spirit religion didn't value their holy son, but it was because the true holy son had been found 10 years ago already. "Zhuo Wuyu," Chu and his voice softened, "no one doubts your loyalty to the spirit religion, but you're the one who has caused all this trouble, so it's up to you to solve it." So Wu Yu cupped his fist and said, "Please give me your orders, sir. It's simple. Kill this impostor who dares to impersonate the holy sun. Cut off his head and show it to everyone." So Wu Yu was taken aback and turned to look at Yang Kai again, struggling with conflicting emotions in his eyes. Yang Kai paid no attention to Chu and his words, not even glancing over at Zhuo Wuyu. Instead, a golden vertical cross appeared in his left eye, displaying a strange expression as he kept gazing into the air. Beside him, Zhuo Wuyu struggled for a while before pointing his long sword at Yang Kai, slowly gathering murderous intent. Only then did Yang Kai give him a glance and asked, "Brother Zhuo, are you going to make a move?" Zhuo Wuyu nodded, and then slowly shook his head as he asked, "Brother Yang, I only have one question for you. Are you a spy for the black ink cult?" "I've said I'm not. Do you believe me?" Yang Kai smiled at him. "Although I may not be the strongest, I have a keen eye for judging people," so Wu Yu replied. "If Brother Yang says he's not a spy, then I believe it. However, what? There's another thing I would like Brother Yang to explain. Say it. During the siege of the cave, you were contaminated with black ink strength, so why were you unscathed? Do you know anything about the World Tree clone? Or the 4 universe pillars?" Yang Kai thought to himself. He couldn't explain it to Zhuo Wuyu, so he could only say, "If I tell you I have a natural resistance to black ink strength due to my innate talent, would you believe me? That thing can't affect me at all." Zhuo Wuyu slowly lowered his sword and gave a bitter smile. "I've encountered too many unbelievable things on this journey. Brother Yang, what you said will be verified by me in the future." "Oh." Yang Kai raised an eyebrow. At this point, shouldn't you trust the people of the spirit religion, rather than someone you only met a few days ago? So Wu Yu shook his head bitterly. "Are you not going to make a move? Have you been contaminated with black ink strength that twisted your nature and become a member of the black ink cult?" Chu and he couldn't help but shout when he saw Zhou Wu Yu still hadn't attacked. So Wu Yu suddenly raised his head. Sir, whether or not I have been contaminated with black ink strength, I only need to meet with the saintess and have her use the purifying heart secret technique on me to know for sure. However, there is one thing that I don't understand at the moment. Please enlighten me. What is it? Chu and he asked impatiently. Sir thinks that Brother Yang is a spy of the black ink cult, and this operation is aimed at him. I can understand that. However, why was I also included in this array then? Sir, this array is very dangerous. Although I only have some faint knowledge of spirit arrays, I can still see some of this one's mysteries. Are you trying to kill both me and Brother Yang with this array? Yang Kai raised his brow and couldn't help but pat Zhou Wu Yu's shoulder. You have a sharp eye, indeed. He had used the demon eye of annihilation to penetrate the illusion and could see all the mysteries of this array. It was a killing array, and once fully activated, anyone inside would undoubtedly die without burial unless they had the ability to break out on their own. Zhou Wu Yu had keenly perceived this, which was why he couldn't fully trust Chu and he. Of course, since the matter involved the holy son of the spirit religion, it was impossible for him to easily believe in Yang Kai either. Ignorant fool. Chu and he didn't explain anything. It seems you have been twisted by black ink strength. It's a pity that my spirit religion will now lose another good man. Kill them. As soon as the words fell, both Yang Kai and Zhou Wu Yu sensed a change in the atmosphere. A fierce, murderous intent emerged out of nowhere, surging in all directions. Zhou Wu Yu shouted, Chu and he, I want to see the saintess. You will never see her. So Wu Yu suddenly realized. So, you guys are the spies of the black ink cult. The black ink cult is nothing. Are they worthy enough for this old master to serve them? So Wu Yu, nothing in this world is as simple as black and white. Unfortunately, you won't have a chance to see it anymore. Chu and he coldly snorted. You old fart. So Wu Yu muttered under his breath, and then reminded Yang Kai, Brother Yang, be careful. This array is powerful and not easy to deal with. We may both die here. The Tao of spirit arrays was not something any ordinary person could study. Although Zhou Wu Yu had seen Yang Kai's strength, he feared that it would be difficult to display that strength once he fell into this trap. However, Yang Kai simply smiled lightly and sat down on a nearby stone pillar, as calm as ever. Rest assured, we will not die here today. Zhou Wu Yu was stunned and could not understand how this man could be so calm at a time like this. While he was still puzzled, a sharp and miserable scream came from outside, one that was abruptly cut off. Zhou Wu Yu was no stranger to such screams. That was the cry of a person just before their death. The screams continued one after another until finally Chu and his voice rang out in utter panic. It's you? No, please spare me. I am willing to serve the black ink cult. Please spare my life. Zhou Wu Yu was horrified when he heard those words. After all, Chu and he was also an elite in the immortal ascension boundary. He did not know what he had encountered at this moment to be begging for mercy so desperately. But obviously it was in vain. The next moment his screams echoed once again. After a while, everything fell silent. The people from the spirit religion outside were probably all dead. With the absence of their control over the spirit array, the illusion that had enveloped Yang Kai and Zhou Wu Yu disappeared along with the breaking of the array. A graceful figure, carrying a shriveled-up body, then lightly floated down in front of Yang Kai. Her beautiful eyes were filled with an unusual light as she stared at him without moving, her crimson tongue licking her lips, as if the man before her was some kind of delicious delicacy. Zhou Wu Yu was horrified as he lifted his sword. Shueji, Marshall Peak, that you're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.